That was the original reference. And
Good. You don't want to.
then running the other way is the next one, or I guess driving.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5:30, and I'll call this work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. And if the city clerk would note on the record that all members of the city council are present except for Councilmember Workman. I'm sure that he will be here momentarily. I have not heard from him. And our work sessions are informal, and we go directly to our agenda. But I'd like to, first of all, inform everyone that tonight's meeting is being conducted both in person and online. City council members and our staff are in the council chambers practicing social distancing. Members of the public may attend in person if they like. Otherwise, the public can watch this meeting online at burnsvillemn.gov/meetings or Comcast Channel 16 or 859. The public can also still participate through Zoom by joining us at zoom.us/join or call 651-372-8299. And more information is available on our meetings webpage and in the council agenda packet. Please note there is an audio delay if you are watching us on TV or online. So if you speak, please mute your video broadcast first. If Zoom meetings attendees experience audio issues, we ask you to leave the meeting and log back in. This usually resolves the issue. Okay, our first item this evening is the Livable Communities Act Affordable Housing Goals. And Jenny Faulkner, our Community Development Director, is going to be teeing this item up and then introducing our guest. Ms. Faulkner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. To tee this up, I just wanted to put up a quick presentation to let you know what the ask is tonight. And the ask tonight is to adopt a resolution opting in to the Livable Communities Act program, housing, let's see here. Anyways, it's on my next slide. And we can opt in anytime, but if we don't opt in, we're not eligible for some grant opportunities. So to opt in, we need to adopt a resolution in November. And just so you know, the grant process generally begins in May and applications are due in November. So if we don't opt in now, we would lose an opportunity to opt in, let's say in January or February for funding for 2021. So timing is important. The goal for us for that planning period, 2021 to 2030, is 146 to 266 affordable housing units, and our life cycle goal is 900, so that's what we would be committing to. And for reference, in our 2040 comp plan, we indicated that there was the opportunity for up to 266 new affordable units possible and 584 new units overall. And that's based on the development and redevelopment potential when we look at kind of where development and redevelopment could happen at those higher densities. That's how those numbers came to be.
Ms. Faulkner, in reading our comp plan, that includes all of the adopted plans for the Burnsville shopping center area and the proposed Minnesota River Quadrant for the next 30 years?
When the comp plan was approved, only part of the Burnsville Center shopping area was re-guided to mix, not the entire thing. After we did the study, after the comp plan was adopted, then we went back and redid the whole thing. So our comp plan numbers are a couple of years older than I would say where current policy is at, and when you just look at the number of apartment units in the queue in the last year and coming next year, we are going to exceed 584 units since we adopted the comp plan, even though this planning period is up until 2040. There's just been a lot of changes in development opportunity here, more than we expected when we set out to write that plan 4 years ago.
Yeah. So the other part of that, my question also has to do with the existing affordable units that we have now. That's calculated into that number?
No, these are new units, Madam Mayor.
Okay, just new units.
We do get credit for our existing naturally occurring affordable housing and new units brought on in our housing performance score.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was, but I wanted to make sure that it's clear for our listening public as well.
Yes. So the discussion this evening, we have Tara Beard with us. She's the Livable Communities Manager at the Met Council. And the question before you to staff is, does the council want to adopt a resolution electing to participate in the local housing incentive program under LCA for 2021 to 2030? So that's the question before you. And with that, I'm going to set up Ms. Beard's presentation and hand it over to her.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I had a question for
Yes,
Jenny.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Jenny, could you give us a little background on this livable communities as it relates to the heart of the city and how that
Yeah.
all came about?
Yeah, because I was one of those people who helped
I know
put
you
this
were.
Livable Communities Act in place back in 1995.
Okay, well, I was not around in 1995. Good thing Madam Mayor was, but she was on the group that did create the program back then. And so we did receive 2 grants, LCA grants, I want to say 2000 and 2002, Tara knows.
Yeah.
For Heart of the City for land acquisition. At the time when we did, and that's where Nicollet Commons Park and the Ames Center was the old AAA building, if
Yep.
you remember that. And then also we bought land where the first parking ramp is off of Pillsbury Avenue. So we used the grants for that. When we got the grants, we made a commitment as part of that 20% of the housing in Heart of the City would be considered affordable, and we have exceeded that goal with what was constructed and with market rate naturally occurring affordable units, just given the high density and the rents and selling prices of some of the condos. So that's, hopefully that answers your question, but we have been
Yep.
benefactors of this grant program in the past.
I guess I'm getting to, I don't think the heart of the city would have happened without that grant.
We received $4 million.
That was a
That
pretty
was how
big,
much we received, those 2 grants.
pretty big amount of money we received
Yeah.
to the city.
Councilmember Gustafson, we also received a grant, well, we worked in partnership with the Dakota County CDA and Presbyterian Homes for the redevelopment of the Valley Ridge Shopping Center.
Yeah.
That received some funds as well, if I recall correctly. That would have been about 2008, 2009, something like that.
Jenny, did we also get some funds for the deck?
Would that have been the pre-development funds from 2018?
It may have been.
There were
But,
some
yeah,
pre-development funds
yeah.
in 2018, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of money through the Livable Communities Act.
Yes, and we've gotten planning grants from the Met Council
Yeah.
as well for our TOD ordinance. I think that was the most recent one that we have, so.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
Thank you, Jenny.
That's what I was thinking.
Thank you.
okay. Welcome.
Hello,
Looking
thank
forward to
you.
your report.
I am really happy to be here. It was really exciting to change out of my yoga pants for the first time in 6 months and feel like I actually work a real job. So this was a fun opportunity. So thank you so much. I really am always so grateful when communities want to learn a little bit more, because it is really easy to kind of get lost in the weeds and sometimes misunderstand or just, so then you hear one thing somewhere and think that must be the truth. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you today how we come up with some of the numbers that are required in the statutes, both the Land Planning Act statute and the Livable Communities Act statute in terms of affordable housing. I've been at the council for almost 7 years, but I've only been managing the Livable Communities Act group for about 10 months. The long-tenured manager, Paul Burns, retired in November, and I was promoted. But prior to that, I was doing housing policy analysis, so I was the staff working on the housing policy plan and coming up with the methodology for the affordable housing allocation that affordable housing goals are based on. We're going to get to all this, so just to say that I've only been in this role for so long, but I've been doing a lot of this work for a good couple of years. So as I'm sure most of you know, the Livable Communities Act is a voluntary grant program adopted by the legislature in 1995. And the 3 high-level goals and purposes for all the programs within Livable Communities Act are to support living wage jobs, a full range of housing options throughout the region, and compact and interconnected development, really trying to take advantage of infrastructure and transit and support it with denser development. And participants or applicants must be units of local government. So just to be clear, that counties can apply for livable communities funds. However, the city on behalf of which, the city where whatever they're doing is located must be a participating community for them to be able to apply. So we have 3 active accounts within Livable Communities. The tax-based revitalization account we call TBRA, which is soil remediation and investigation. So it's a brownfield cleanup grant. And we partner with DEED and in Hennepin and Ramsey counties with those county brownfield cleanup funds. And for that reason, it's important sometimes for folks to realize that you must be a Livable Communities Act participant to receive those DEED funds as well. So that's an important consideration too, sometimes for folks that think, well, we probably would never apply to LCA, but if you think you might apply to DEED for any brownfield cleanup, it would also be a requirement. The local housing incentive account is the one account within Livable Communities that is specifically and purposefully for the creation of affordable housing. And for that reason, we partner with Minnesota Housing as one of the funding partners of their consolidated RFP, which comes out once a year and includes all sorts of affordable housing resources such as low-income housing tax credits, housing infrastructure bonds, and other funding that Minnesota Housing and their partners have. The Livable Communities demonstration account is really the kind of the big kahuna. And not only because it has the highest kind of allocation of funding available to it per the statutory guidelines, but also because it can kind of be the most exciting one, and it's the one we sort of, versus local housing incentives account where we partner with a lot of other folks that are actually bringing a lot more money to the table. We have a lot of ownership over the LCDA accounts, and so we take a lot of pride in kind of making sure we're getting it right. We did create in 2011 a subcategory within LCDA for areas that are within a half-mile radius of high-use transit station areas, whether LRT, BRT, or park and rides. And both LCDA and LCDA TOD include pre-development programs for usually a smaller amount of money is available for some pre-development, feasibility studies, community engagement, et cetera, held separately in a separate RFP and process from the development programs. The 2020 funding awards totaled over $24 million, and we usually have between 20 and 25 million total across all these accounts in a given year. So it's quite a sum of money that adds up. Since LCA was passed and we've been awarding grants, we have made over 1,000 grant awards totaling over $400 million. And so this map just gives you kind of a hot spot with the blue dots idea of where awards have been made. We currently have 97 cities that participate in this current decade of 2011 to 2020, which is expiring at the end of this year. All but 13 have received some sort of LCA funding since 1996. So it's been a widely used program, although unsurprisingly you can see that there have been more awards the further into the center of the region. Over 49,000 housing units have been built using and leveraging LCA funds, and over 25,000 of those were affordable. Over 56,000 jobs have been preserved or created, and over 2,400 acres of soil have been cleaned up. So we're very proud and very grateful for the opportunity to do this. One thing Paul Burns would always say that I like to say too is that when we go to like national conferences and speak to our peers, which is admittedly a small group of like regional government agencies, their jaws just drop that we have this tool, that we have this program, and that we're able to provide opportunities for cities to do to make their visions come true for development. I mentioned that we currently have 97 cities participating. Here is a map to show you who is currently participating. And as Mayor Couts knows, there are some requirements. We talk a lot at the council about carrots and sticks, and LCA is a great example of carrots. And here is but it doesn't come for free. So the requirements that cities have to agree to in order to participate include adopting affordable and life cycle housing goals, which is the particular requirement we're going to talk about today. That they establish a housing action plan, and that is something that statute says has to be developed by June 30th of the year after signing up to participate. So your housing action plan would be due by June 30th. What we are advising folks on is that given the incredibly intensive work we've all been doing on comprehensive planning, the housing element of your comprehensive plan, assuming it's complete and consistent with council policy, is sufficient to show direction of your housing action plan. It's also really hard to show action when you just started, so one of the things that will also comprise your housing action plan will be, starting in 2022, an annual housing production survey we send all communities. Jenny is probably familiar with it, gets filled out. We will ask a couple additional questions to talk about how it's going, meeting goals, what barriers have been toward meeting the adopted goals, and if there's anything the council can do to help with achieving those goals. So that combination of responding to that survey, starting in 2022 on an annual basis, and a housing element in your comprehensive plan that's consistent with council policy, those two things comprise your housing action plan for the decade.
So, Ms. Beard, we're in redevelopment, and a lot of this is contingent upon developers and financing.
Yes.
So is that taken into consideration when you're looking at meeting goals or delay in goals being met? Because we don't have any land, raw land. So most of what we have on the books is redevelopment.
Mayor Couts, thank you. There is no penalty if you aren't meeting your goals. There is no sort of shaming or anything like that. We use the survey to track how successful communities are being, because we want to help if they are having trouble and if there are any resources or tools out there that could be used. But the idea of adopting affordable and life cycle housing goals on a decennial basis, right, to know what's going to be possible over 10 years is next to impossible. So we do our best at the high level to kind of set a reasonable expectation, but there's no sort of penalty for not reaching goals, because we all know that we can't control everything that would go into them getting built. We kind of make our best guess.
Yeah, because we don't own the land.
Right. And then the final kind of requirement from statute for participation in livable communities is that you spend what we lovingly call ALHOA, the Affordable and Life Cycle Housing Opportunity Amount. And that is a statutorily defined equation based on your property tax capacity. And every city to be in good standing for participation needs to spend at least 85% of that amount toward creating affordable or life cycle housing opportunities to be in good standing on an annual basis. So every August, we send you a letter telling you what the calculation of your ALHOA amount is for the next year so that you can plan. But I will say that we do use any local tax sent to county CDAs, so Dakota County, your contribution to Dakota County and the share of that goes towards creating affordable housing opportunities counts towards your ALHOA. Burnsville's never had any trouble meeting its ALHOA. We monitor that as a question in that survey that I mentioned annually. We ask, have you spent this much? But sometimes if we can get from the county that your contribution already exceeded your ALHOA, we don't even ask the question because we've already documented that you've met it. So why do cities have to re-enroll now? Well, of those three requirements, the adoption of affordable and life cycle housing goals is done decennially, and so your current adopted goals expire, and every LCA participant's current adopted and life cycle housing affordable and life cycle housing goals expire at the end of this year. So to be meeting the statutory requirement to have adopted goals, they need to be adopted before the end of this year, and statute calls out November 15th as the deadline for participation in the next year. So if for some reason you didn't adopt goals by November 15th of this year, you wouldn't be eligible to apply in 2021, but as long as you adopted them by November 15th of next year, you could be participating again by 2022. Let's see. I think I just said all those things, so. Oh, and save the date. So this slide is talking about a different housing measure because it's the basis of the measure for affordable housing goals. And so the next part of the presentation is to kind of share with you all where these numbers come from. And your goals are calculated based on your future need for affordable housing. So I'm going to start with sharing how we calculated that need. And there was a great question at the beginning about existing units and that counting. And so I want to be clear that the estimated number of additional households that will need affordable housing in 2021 to 2030, they don't exist yet. There are projections of additional households that don't exist right now. So if affordable housing is being built right now, that's really important and addresses the need for 2011 to 2020 affordable housing based on that population. But when we are talking about the allocation of affordable housing need, it's based on an estimate of additional households.
Jerry, also explain to everybody, because when you make that calculation, you're looking at commercial as well.
Yep.
Because of jobs, and
Yep.
then what you're determining as what the need would be for affordable housing for the different kinds of jobs in the different commercial and industrial areas that every community has. So if you can talk a little bit about that, so people understand the nexus of how you get to all of those numbers.
Yes.
Because it's not just numbers you're pulling out and saying, this, Burnsville, this is your allocation. You're looking at our commercial, industrial, and also the different businesses that we have. One of the things that the Met Council that I always raise the awareness of is that jobs and economic development has no boundaries. So a lot of the people who also work in Burnsville and may live in affordable housing may not live in Burnsville, but are commuting into Burnsville for jobs. So talk a little bit about that, because that's part of how all of this is knitted together.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. That is on the agenda. And to your point, so the forecasted growth in households we expect in the entire region for 2021 to 2030 is 119,000 households. And that expected forecasted growth factors so many things in. It factors in land use. So we look at communities' current land use and what it would allow. So we aren't projecting growth that represents densities that don't actually exist. It looks at job growth and job creation. It looks at past trends in development and preferences in where folks want to live. It definitely looks at kind of our economic competitiveness compared to other regions, so that we can think about in-migration versus out-migration. The folks on our research team and the economists and researchers and PhDs, they work really hard and use really sophisticated models to come up with these admittedly never going to be exactly correct forecasts. They're forecasts. We plan off them. But a lot goes into, transit patterns and where roadways are. All goes into how this expected growth number is calculated. For calculating community share of affordable housing for that same decade, we start by using some of that economic and job-based data to estimate how much of those 119,000 households will be earning 80% of the area median income or below. And so for 2020, 80% of the area median income would be about $80,000 a year for a family of four. And so that number was estimated to be 37,900. And that's about 33% of 119,000.
Could you just repeat that little bit? You were putting numbers up and I don't think we heard them correctly.
You bet. So of the 119,000 additional households we expect to come to the region in the 2021 to 2030 decade, we expect that 37,900 of them will be earning 80% of the area median income or less.
Which was how much?
About 37,900 households.
What did you say the 80% AMI was? Did you say that was 80,000?
Oh, that's $80,000 in 2020 for a family of four.
Yeah, family of four.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And so that's how we determine what the regional need for affordable housing is. It's the future need for folks earning 80% AMI to not pay more than 30% of their income toward housing costs. And that 37,900 number is about 33% of that total 119,000. So we're looking at a growth in the coming decade. About 33% of it will be households in need of what we currently define as affordable housing.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, Councilmember Keeley, and then did you want to have a question? Then I'll go to Councilmember Schultz.
I just want to know where that 33% came from. Is that really what it consistently is today, and that's what you're using as your forecast tool, or there's other data that indicates where that a third comes from?
Yes, so those kind of sophisticated models and estimates of how much growth we're expecting include a lot of looking at what types of jobs we are expecting and what kind of wages they pay, certainly what our past kind of in-migration and out-migration patterns have been across demographic backgrounds and income levels. And so, like I said, it's definitely not an exact science, but a lot of data and analysis goes into this projection of how much households coming to the region will be earning.
How does that 33 compare to the last 10 years?
It was, I think, 50-something percent. It was 50, I'm going to get confused. I know that the regional need for affordable housing in the 2011 to 2020 decade was in the 50-something thousands.
56.
So it was much higher than 37,000. What I don't remember is the growth, the total growth, and so the percentage. I can look it up real quick, or I can look it up at the end.
I'm just curious if we're
and make sure
trending
you get that
better or
answer.
worse as far as the need. Is this 37.9 as a third of the new houses? Is that an improvement? In other words, a smaller amount required because incomes are getting better, or is it a battle that we're sort of losing over time where we keep needing more? Sounds like it might be a little bit better depending on what the new house numbers were for the last 10 years against your 50,000 number.
Okay, Kara?
Mayor Couts,
I have
if I
same
may,
questions.
Mayor
Oh,
Couts, thank
did
you.
you want to follow up with that?
Yes, if I may.
Yes, please.
I think that the exact number, yes, is lower, but just, how we kind of measure a need includes a lot of other factors, like how many households are housing cost burdened, like how many households are homeless or housing unstable, and so it's hard to use a term like, is it getting better or not from just this measure, but yes, the number is less than the last decade.
Okay,
And I believe the growth we expected was less as well.
okay, Kara?
My question was answered, thank you very much.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, and I think some things are going to change, Tara, as we go forward, because all paradigms have shifted.
Oh my gosh, right.
And so when all paradigms have shifted, you go back to zero, and then you're going to have to recreate. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year as the scientists get into really looking at recalculating all of this with regard to all of the different things that are happening in the different industries and the
Yes.
economy.
I agree, Mayor Couts. I think we honestly have no idea
Yeah.
how this will be impacted. And so these numbers definitely don't represent the latest and greatest information. And I know the 2011 to 2020 numbers did not factor in the Great Recession, and we got much less growth than we
right.
anticipated in that decade. And so that number of 56,000, I believe, some households
That's what I
certainly
was
wasn't
had
that
in my
high.
56,000.
right,
And that was
right.
during the recession.
Yep, so, again, totally admit it's not an exact science. As far as I know, we have never stopped mid-decade and recalculated. Again, I think part of it is considering, the purpose is to take stock every 10 years, plan to the best of our ability. There isn't a real consequence for not getting there, but who knows? I don't think it's impossible that we could take a look mid-decade if things changed drastically.
Yeah.
If I may, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Part of the reason I asked the
Councilmember Key.
question is, when we throw a lot of money at something, we expect it to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And there's now, 25, this was started in 1996 or 5?
95?
95, so we have, 25 years. The first 5 probably, maybe not a lot happened, but in that O's decade, you got some traction, and then now we finished our second decade, and you would hope that we've made measurable progress, and that we're not just chasing a cat's tail and never actually improving
Yeah.
in the circumstance, right?
Yeah, you can even if you look at the communities that started in 1995 and started to apply for all of this, and in the livable communities, Burnsville, St. Louis Park were the first ones who really got going with all of the mixed-use development and all of that. You can see progress. Where you look at all of this and you look at Hennepin and Ramsey County, a lot of money was thrown into those two counties and those two cities, yeah. And so those of us in the suburbs always have to compete with a lot of that was going on.
Those 2 counties get a lot of money from
Yeah,
the
they
state
do.
in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just pulled this slide back a couple to point out the 25,500 affordable units built.
Yeah.
And that's over 25 years, not in one decade, but
Yeah.
I think I could fairly confidently say that I think we'd be in rougher shape in terms of affordable housing outcomes if that many units if we didn't have those units.
Councilmember Gustafson.
I have a question. As a community, if we're fortunate enough to receive grants, which we have in the past, are there any restrictions on what we can do with that, working with developers? I'm talking about land acquisitions or demolition or any of that. Can that money be used for pretty much anything to partner with a developer to do something?
Mayor Couts,
Yeah,
Councilmember,
Tamara.
there are restrictions for how funds can be used. So eligible costs can include acquisition. It depends on the type of project. So eligible costs will be or acquisition is an eligible cost within the LCDA programs for affordable housing, and if it's a mixed income, we would prorate the land cost with the amount of affordable housing in the proposed project. We have, as a practice for as far back as I don't know, not allowed the use of LCDA or TOD funds to be used for building improvements. So our funding has been used for site improvements, site preparation, infrastructure development, et cetera. That's not a statutory limitation. That is a longstanding practice.
Yeah.
And so, but no, our funds can't be used for just anything. But in our annual look at our fund distribution plan and the scoring criteria, we are able to have conversations about whether or not the eligible uses continue to be the right eligible uses. And I'll offer that one of the things specifically called out in statute as an intention of the program is to preserve affordable housing opportunities. But because we don't fund building improvements, and preservation of existing housing often requires money to fund improvements only to the building. You're not building a new stormwater system or a new sidewalk system. And so it's basically rendered that money unusable for that use. And so in 2021, we are making a change to allow for construction costs on the building for preservation projects. And that's a big change, but it's one of those things that I think will make the program be able to operate more true to the intent.
Yeah.
We do
So
quick
remember,
follow-up.
Councilmember Gustafson, we used that money to purchase, so acquisition, we purchased a AAA.
Right.
And the heart of the city was a special district, so it was, the 20% was spread over all of the 54 acres.
I'm just thinking of, in our city, because we are a redevelopment city, because we're pretty much built out, that if we can help out with things like demolition, should somebody buy a piece of property that has a building that does no longer make sense,
Yes,
can we help,
demolition is
can we help with that kind of thing
Yes.
with
Yeah.
them?
Demolition is an eligible cost.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah. Okay.
Property in mind.
So how do we get from the 37,900 to individual communities' allocation of affordable housing need in 2021? So I kind of talked a little bit about that top cube of determining the regional need, that it's 37,900 households, but and then we allocate it to cities so that they can fulfill their comp plan requirement in the Land Planning Act to guide enough land such that they can meet the future need for affordable housing, and that's directly from the Land Planning Act. But we only allocate that need to cities that are experiencing sewer service growth, and the reason for that is that council policy is not to encourage high density where there isn't sewer service capacity. It's not a good use of land, and in past years, more than 98% of all new affordable housing has been in a form of high density, and the average there's somewhere between 20 or 30 units an acre. So we only expect land guided at least 8 units an acre or above counts toward being land available for potential affordable housing development, but anything less than 8 acres isn't really feasible land for affordable housing development in our current reality. And so we only allocate that growth in affordable housing need to cities with sewer service growth. And if you're a city with a portion of sewer service growth, we kind of prorate it. So for local adjustments, we start with the straight 33%, right? That is equitable across the region. That 33% of new households we're expecting to need affordable housing. But then we do make some adjustments. So one of the adjustments is for existing affordable housing. So if you are a community with more than an average community share of affordable housing, your allocation number will be adjusted downward. And the opposite is also true. And when we were using the 80% AMI kind of measure for what was affordable in 2014 and 15, when we were developing this number, the average community's existing affordable housing stock was around 62-ish%. I'm always really close, but I'm really bad with exact numbers, so I hope that that's okay with you, but I know it's in the 60s. And a lot of people are surprised to find that out, that the average community actually has more than half of its housing is affordable at 80% AMI. But if you had more than 62%, I believe that was it, your allocation would be adjusted downward and vice versa. We also look at that job worker ratio that Mayor Couts was talking about. So if within your community in a 5-mile radius, you have a lot of low-wage workers, a lot of low-wage paying jobs, and very little very little housing affordable at those wages. Your allocation would get adjusted upward because you're you're importing low-wage workers, right? And then the reverse is true. If you have, don't have a lot of low-wage jobs, but you have a lot of low-wage workers residing in that area, your allocation will be adjusted downward because you are exporting low-wage workers, and so that adjustment is made as well. Important to note that the existing affordable housing adjustment is twice as impactful as the low-wage jobs to low-wage workers adjustment, just because we think and we hear that that is the single most important issue to consider amongst cities when thinking about allocating future affordable housing need. And we know that the intention is to create a little bit more parity across the region in terms of housing choices. And so the existing affordable housing as a kind of adjustment measure for future commitment to guide land so that it could be met is really, really important. And then for this decade, we didn't do this last decade, we actually kind of go back to that existing affordable housing piece, and we kind of do that, we look at your existing affordable housing and where it lands in those bands of affordability and compare that to the regional bands of affordability. And so then even within your final allocation, it may, the numbers may move a bit within the bands of affordability to reflect, existing housing conditions. For example, at the time of doing this this equation, the city of Edina had a lot less affordable housing than other cities overall, but they had 7% of their housing was affordable at 30% AMI or below because of a large area of really deeply affordable assisted living and senior housing options. And so their allocation number didn't go down, but it focuses on the 50 to 80% AMI level or the 30 to 50% AMI level. So we made adjustments in that direction as well. Any questions on the methodology there?
No, I don't see anybody.
So that's how we calculated your allocation of affordable housing need, which you adopted in your comprehensive plan, and I believe that was 266 units. And I think I didn't mention, I think it's implied, but just to be sure, when I say we start with 33%, we start with 33% of your forecasted growth for the decade. So we certainly wouldn't give you an allocation of need for a number of units higher than the number of units you are anticipating to be developed in that decade. So how are affordable housing goals different than your allocation of affordable housing need? And we kind of shorthand them, goals versus need. How are your affordable housing goals for LCA participation calculated? And we have been doing work with a wide variety of stakeholders since about November. We actually had some live meetings before March where we talked about kind of how should we calculate it, because we only do it every 10 years. It's worth sitting down and thinking hard about what the purpose of adopting affordable housing goals are and how they should be calculated. And we brought a lot of folks that had been a part of the original conversation, not the original, the last conversation in 2011, people from metro cities, people from many different cities and counties. We kind of got a stakeholder group together and took a look at how we did it the last time and how we might want to do it this time. The short version of the story is that we decided that the way they came up with how to do it 10 years ago was a pretty smart way, and so we should probably do it that way again. And basically, it takes the approach of saying that your allocation of affordable housing need is based on households we expect to come here. It's not, those households don't care if we have the available housing or not, but we're expecting it. But that doesn't mean we have the resources to build that much affordable housing. And so if we're talking about a goal, it shouldn't stray. It shouldn't only be based on, increasing demand. It should also factor in on what's kind of possible. And so we worked with Minnesota Housing, just as was done 10 years ago, to kind of do some, envelope math to say, okay, look, if from what we know about the housing resource, affordable housing finance environment, what's the last 5 years look like? What do we think about the next few years? Let's come up with kind of a sense of what we can expect in terms of resources and affordable housing creation in a given year, looking over the next 10 years. And the math came to about 45% of that 37,900 number of future need in the 2020 decade could be met if resources for affordable housing stay somewhat relevant or somewhat similar to how they are today. Again, not exact math at all, but certainly our best guess. Stop. I believe there's a question there.
Yep. Councilmember Gustafson.
When you look at affordable housing, Would the Met Council look at ADUs and tiny houses as part of the affordable housing stock that we create in the city?
Mayor Couch, great question. To be considered affordable, it needs to be for these types of measures, it needs to be income restricted.
Yeah.
So communities have a lot of existing affordable housing, and that doesn't mean that it's serving households that need affordable housing, because folks can choose in the free market to live less than their means, which isn't a bad idea. But it does really mean, if we can't be sure it's serving a household that needs affordable housing, a household at a certain income or less, we can't consider it affordable.
Yeah.
So the answer is it depends. If your ADU policy, if it included some kind of, covenant or agreement with the property owner that it would be rented to folks who were screened for their income, then yes, we would consider it affordable. But that's a lot of work that isn't typically built into most ADU policies right now. And the number of ADUs that got built might not be enough to make it worth it for that kind of administrative effort. But that would be a local decision you guys could make.
Tiny houses would also fall into that category then?
Same exact, yep. What we're looking for is there a mechanism to require the income be at 80% or less?
Thank you.
Okay.
It doesn't mean naturally occurring without subsidy isn't really important and doesn't help a lot of folks. It just isn't something we can safely or accurately count. Okay, so so I will say that the last decade, when Minnesota Housing worked with a lot of these similar partners to determine what a feasible resource amount would be, they actually were at 65%. So your affordable housing goals for this decade actually represent 65% of your allocation of need for this decade. And that was considered a lot by the group. And they thought, the Minnesota housing process captures the vast, vast majority of funding for affordable housing in the region, but it doesn't capture everything. There are ways that local governments or federal resources that don't have to go through Minnesota housing can be used. And so this group decided that they thought 45% was a little low. Let's be ambitious and let's set the low end of our affordable housing goals 10% higher than that, at 55% of your affordable housing need allocation. So the equation ends up like this. You have a need for 2021 to 2030 for this decade. Multiply that by 55%. That's the low end of your affordable housing goal. And then we do keep it as a range, as we did 10 years ago. And so it does go up all the way to the high end is your allocation of need. And that was a fascinating discussion. I mean, we had folks representing cities on this committee that said, if you set this goal as 55% of our need, our council will meet that need and say, we're done. We'll meet that goal and say, we're done, and there will be nothing we can do to convince them to build anything more. And then we had other folks say, if you ask me to tell my council that the need number is our goal as well, when we know we don't have enough funding to build it, they won't re-enroll in LCA. And so for that reason, we decided to keep it a range, go figure, which I think makes a lot of sense, actually. It sort of acknowledges that these numbers are not, exact. So what does that look like for Burnsville? Your allocation of need for the decade is 266, 55% of that is 146, and that's why your affordable housing goal is 146 to 266 for the 2020 decade. And a lot of you this is my last slide, a lot of you spoke to some of these things already, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't have one slide encouraging you and sharing the reasons why I certainly think there's value in participating in LCA. It's an opportunity for you to implement the vision you have for your community, to add value to projects, and do things that you wouldn't be able to do with a standard kind of pro forma. You can clean up your land, create jobs, provide a range of housing, and do some transit-oriented development, which Burnsville has a handful of eligible locations for the TOD grants as well. I'll stop there, but I'm happy to continue to answer questions.
Any questions, or did you take a look at the resolution? Councilmember Schultz?
So, and I get that the affordable housing goal that you're asking us to adopt is 146 to 266. And pardon me if I missed it, but where was the discussion on the life cycle goal?
Tara?
You did not miss it.
No.
Okay, okay, good, because I'm like,
You noticed an intentional omission.
okay.
And I would be fascinated on your take of this, Mayor Kurtz, because, my best understanding is that in 1995, when this was being considered, it was incredibly difficult to encourage multifamily housing outside of the central cities. And so the life
Because we
cycle
did, in Burnsville and most suburbs, density was a bad
off the
word.
table, right? And so my understanding is that the life cycle goal was really kind of intended to create not just an affordable housing goal, but a goal to just diversify housing stock and provide some
Yep.
density diversity
Yep.
in communities and start to support some of the transit and other infrastructure investments that were helping the region grow.
Yeah, and that's how we got to the diversity of housing stock in the heart of the city, where you have condominiums and you have senior housing and so forth.
Right.
Because then you have life cycle housing from,
In the,
Okay, so could you define could you say how you have life cycle housing defined?
multifamily housing.
yeah.
Okay, so that's just what, it's multifamily housing. Okay, I thought we were on to something entirely different, like,
I think most people do. You may
Senior
have been
care.
suspecting it was, yeah, what's your first place out of college like? What's your first starter home? What's your home when you're,
exactly.
yeah.
So that's why this did not make sense.
Sure, that makes, I can see that. And it's a common misconception. And life cycle is not defined in the statute. And, you know, if you think about it, post-recession, multifamily housing has been some of the only housing being built. So
Yeah.
this sort of idea of needing to encourage or incentivize communities to do multifamily is really less of a need at this point in time. I think in terms of the life cycle goal being more of that trajectory of housing choice over your lifetime, I can tell you, there would be no way for the council to accurately measure goals for that. To sort of understand that kind of nuanced need and that level of data would be really difficult. And so I don't think it was the intent in the first place, but even when I think about like, well, could we even do that? I think we would need a couple additional research staff doing that full time just to track it that way. But you still have to adopt them per statute. And so we do calculate them and basically all we do is look at those residential densities that are 8 acres, 8 units per acre or higher that are planned to be developed in the 2020 decade. We look at the midpoint density of that range. So we look at if it's 8 to 10, it would be 9 units an acre. If it's 8 to 20, it would be 14 units an acre. And we apply that to how many acres you're expecting to develop in that decade of that particular land use. And we do the math. And we did the math for you, and it was well over 1,000 units. But your forecasted growth for 2021 to 2030 is only 900 units. So for any communities where we did that land use calculation based on your development staging tables and your comp plan, if it was over your forecasted growth for the decade, we capped it there. So that's why you're capped at 900.
So this is saying that the expectation is that there will be 900 not built, not counting the ones built this year, or the ones currently in process, which includes ones that the plans have been approved, but perhaps ground hasn't been broken?
So it's definitely a little sticky this year and next year, just because it's really
Right.
hard, right? I think we would go by the day that the units are occupiable.
Yeah, the
So-
certificate of
Yeah, they're
occupancy.
occupiable.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, the
that
certificate of
helps.
occupancy rather than, because the Healy-Ramey project, I would say, is all part of that next decade.
Yeah.
And that's some of it is already being built, but not yet occupied, did not get their
Okay, so we're gonna go with
certificate.
certificate of occupancy
Yeah,
for the cutoff.
okay,
So we're looking at 900 more in the next 10-year.
yeah.
I understand that there's a statute, but I mean, I guess that's for the legislature, whomever. But when we're being asked to adopt goals, and I don't like to adopt BS goals, like, I don't like to do that. That's just not anything I wanna do. Like, if we adopt goals, like, I want us to actually be doing that. And so then this life cycle housing goal, I mean, whether we hit it or not, it's something that we can't really calculate truthfully, and I don't know. It seems like a nonsense goal, and it seems like a nonsense way that this goal came about. And I'm unhappy with that. I'm unhappy that would still be a part of that. If there is a problem with it, I would rather it be changed than everyone just go, gotta do her. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think that's not good government, and I don't like that. I don't like that. So if you could please pass that feedback back.
And Kara, that's the reason why I raised the issue that we're redevelopment. And
Exactly.
we have no control over what developers and financiers are going to do.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, we put things in place, and that's why you talk about the carrot rather than the stick, that the goals are put out there, because I remember the discussion when goals were put in place, and it's hard for a community like Burnsville that we don't have any raw land. So redevelopment is tougher to do,
What I would offer
yeah.
is that this goal is actually much lower than the amount of land you have guided at the densities you have guided that your comp plan suggests will develop in the decade. That's higher than 900 actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I apologize if I gave the impression that it's meaningless. I think what a better way to characterize it would be that it was an incentive that was really the focus then, that I don't think we would need these goals for cities to build multifamily anymore.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's totally, invaluable to sort of think about, okay, we have this goal, so we are thinking about kind of our multifamily, single-family mix. And it is kind of a Venn diagram. So if you have multifamily that gets built and it's affordable, it counts towards both goals.
Okay, Councilmember Workman?
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Beard. That was a very helpful presentation. I just have some kind of not as complicated as Kara questions. What is your funding source for the $24 million? Where does that money come from typically?
Yeah, boy, you're testing me, and Mayor Couts is gonna catch me here. It depends. So, the vast majority of it is funded through property tax levy. And there's a calculation that goes into how much gets put in the Livable Communities Demonstration Account Fund. It's usually, at this point, it's been like $15 million a year, using that equation that's based on property tax throughout the entire region. So you are contributing toward this funding that we're able to dole out. And I completely acknowledge and own that the awards tend to be conglomerate in the central city, and my focus as the new manager is to see how we can increase applications from more geographic diversity, but we are also limited by only making awards for projects that have applied. And so that's our job, is to encourage more applications coming from other parts of the region, making sure folks know this program works for them.
Okay.
The TBRA grant comes from Fiscal Disparities Fund, and there's a portion of that, $5 million set amount in
contribute to that,
statute that
too.
comes from fiscal disparities that goes into TBRA. And the local housing incentives account gets $1 million also from fiscal disparities, plus $500,000 from the LCDA pot. And then we often have relinquishments or interest earnings, especially 25 years in. So sometimes in our annual fund distribution plan, the council often adds additional funding to those pots.
So if a community decides to opt out of this, they're still contributing to these funds regardless? Or if a city were to opt out, then that piece of the property tax would not be forwarded to this program?
No,
The former.
we still.
So you pay for it regardless if you
right.
participate or not? Okay.
We're a net loss.
Yeah.
Well, and that,
So
you
that-
kind of helped me pave to my next question was, and I don't know if we have a specific answer for this, but this would be for Jenny or Melanie, but do we know about how many applications we have submitted for this grant and maybe not gotten in comparison to the 3 that we have?
Okay.
Or maybe
Jenny-
Tara does know.
Tara said 4.
You've applied, and my data shows that you've applied 4 times and been awarded 4 times.
Oh,
3 in the, I think it was 99, 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
And then
Jenny
this
says
one pre-development one in
Yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I know there are at least 2 applications that I was a part of. The first application for Valley Ridge Shopping Center was
Yeah.
turned down by the Met Council because of a project they had in Wayzata that they were struggling with some issues, and they thought they'd have the same issues here. And we had to go back a second time to prove them wrong. The next grant we applied for was for a potential hotel in heart of the city, and we got turned down for that project because it didn't have any affordable housing to it.
Oh, I apologize, those weren't in my database and they should have been. Thank you.
Okay, and then I just got one more question.
Okay,
And I'll let.
yeah, and then I'll go to Councilmember Gustafson.
Which kind of leads me to my next question is what is the, and you don't have to give away any trade secrets here, but can you just kind of give an idea of what the process is when the Met Council reviews these applications and what things are considered? Or is it just a like a checklist and you're saying, okay, you've met these and then here, or is there something else that we're not aware of that would help?
That's a great question. We just put them in a bucket and we have a
Need a
very
bigger bucket.
elaborate, as described in our 4 People Have Read fund distribution plan, that describes a 2-step scoring process. The scoring criteria in step 1 is reviewed by subject matter experts in staff, on our Met Council staff. So, you know, if it's a environmental piece, we have an environmental planner, maybe a wastewater services planner that would look at that piece of it. If it's a housing evaluation, in fact, before I was manager, I was often asked to score for housing on livable communities projects as a housing policy analyst at the council. And then there's a minimum score you have to meet in step 1, and if you meet it, you move on to step 2. Step 2 is evaluated outside by an external advisory committee called the Livable Communities Advisory Committee. And that is, I believe, a 16-member group, and it's made up of elected officials, of city staff, of developers, of architects, landscape architects, community, you know, development experts of all types. And currently, this and last year, the chair has been Mayor Joe Emerson from White Bear Lake. And that committee reviews on the step 2 scoring criteria. They interview all the applicants, have to come in and to answer questions. And then they, you know, share their different thoughts and everybody puts in a score and the average scores come out. And then the step 1 scores and the step 2 scores are added to create kind of a list of winners. But then there is oftentimes either a statutorily required or a council policy adopted, depending on which fund it's coming from. That limits how much of the award can go to the central cities. So for example, in LCDA, no more than 40% of the awards can go to Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's not statutorily required, but it's a council practice. And then for the TOD awards, there's not a split, but there is a $2 million award limit that any city for any number of applications can't go beyond $2 million. Again, that's not required, it's a council practice. I believe the TBRE program, the Brownfield program, has a statutorily defined breakout for central cities versus suburban communities, and I can't remember that breakout exactly right now. But it's something probably like the 40-60 split.
Okay. So our communities, does, in that assessment process, is there a report card there on how cities are doing to meet these goals, and is that part of the assessment too? And would that maybe speak to why Minneapolis and St. Paul are maybe getting more of the chunk of money because they're actually have more dots on the map?
That's a fantastic question. So I guess we still do it. So we do this thing called calculate an annual housing performance score. And that's a practice that the council started, I think, in response to the idea of kind of measuring cities' efforts toward creating a full range of housing options and having that impact their competitiveness in the LCA process. And so I think as long as I can remember, up until last year, a housing performance score, which every city would get on a scale of 1 to 100, would be a final tack on to your score, converted down to 10. So it would be, you know, if your score was 97, it would be 9.7, and that would just get added to the end. Now, Minneapolis and St. Paul almost always score 100 for their housing performance score. But what we found, and this was so interesting, because we had never allowed the housing performance score to be a part of the LHIA, the affordable housing scoring process, because the whole point was to create additional affordable housing options. Well, like somewhere upwards of 70% of our housing funded through LCDA is affordable housing. So we were kind of doing exactly what we were trying not to do with LHIA, inadvertently and unintentionally with LCDA. We also found that it didn't have a very big impact. It wasn't strongly swaying the scores, because you know, if one community is an 83 and one community is a 93, that's a big difference. If a community's, you know, but that difference gets distilled down to 1 point out of like 165 points for a total score in your LCA process. So given that as much as the housing performance score is an incredibly helpful exercise on our part to know where folks are at their goals, where things are working, where folks are having trouble, what maybe has changed, what policies are in place, it's incredibly helpful in that way. Creating this sort of numerical apples to apples comparison was problematic, and using that as a part of the scoring criteria was something that the council agreed was not helpful, and we took it out for this year was the very first time. So we no longer count that, but we still send out that survey, ask lots of information about affordable housing production, compare that against your goal to understand how things are going and track it. We absolutely track affordable housing production. We do all of those things, and we still currently technically calculate a score for you. I will be honest, I think that staff's recommendation would be to just continue it as a kind of a annual exercise without necessarily coming up with numerical scores. But the last time we talked about it with a broad group of stakeholders, they said, no, we really like being scored. So for now, we're keeping it, but it's no longer a part of the scoring process.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Gustafson.
As I've been listening to this tonight, I look at the goals put forward in the city, in our redevelopment efforts. I think the goals are very achievable for the city of Burnsville. I know not only our Chamber of Commerce, but our employers and our employees are screaming for some affordable housing here in the city with the type of jobs we have here. We definitely need that in the city here. And I can't help but think that as a city that has to redevelop, that these grants really help us toward our goals of getting these things done, because we know it's more expensive to redevelop because people have to tear things down, and it's not greenfield that others have. And so having just one more like arrow in our quiver for redevelopment, I think just makes a whole lot of sense for us as a community. And it's more of a statement than a question, but this is what I was getting from all of this.
If we don't opt in, we get nothing.
If we don't opt in, we just sit there. I mean, we just turned down an affordable housing because you wanted TIF.
Yeah.
Had we had something like this in our back pocket, we can go, hey, we got some grants that we can do something with. That might have offset that and made that affordable housing happen.
Couldn't we have done that?
Yeah, that's my question, if I
don't
may,
know.
just.
Nobody brought it up.
We had
What was
a,
exhausted all those options?
Excuse me, what was that?
well, it was the project that came before us at a work session that we sent packing fairly quickly because they wanted a housing TIF, and we rejected it out of hand for that reason. It's a workforce housing project. It's a project we don't have currently, so I think it fits within our mix of what's missing. I'm curious if this grant program could be used in any way with that type of project, and we're talking with the county about that project now, just so we can find a way to bring it back. But is this an option? Is this grant program an option?
Tara, is that an option to use grant money for affordable housing?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak to the competition
That's right. The thing
cycle
is-
and whether it would be awarded, but, and not
But
knowing
to meet the criteria, we just have to make sure that they come in and they tell us what it is that they need, and then then you can apply for the grant. But otherwise,
I don't think that was income restricted though, was it?
Oh.
He was saying it was affordable.
it's affordable.
It was,
Yeah.
rents were like 900 to 13
Yeah,
for a
it was
three-bedroom.
affordable
so
housing.
It was
We
subsidized
do
to
fund
some
market rate
degree,
housing with
right?
LCDA. It's just that you're highly prioritized for affordable housing in the point system, and so the vast majority,
Yeah.
of what
But
we
if you
award
don't,
is
if you
affordable.
don't opt in, you don't have the ability to apply for a grant.
We pay, but we never get back.
Yeah. So the thing is, there's nothing that we lose by opting into the program. And this was a discussion we had also back in the 90s. And we said, what do we have to lose? And of course, I was the second chair of the Livable Communities Advisory Board. So, but if you don't opt in, then you don't have the opportunity to apply for a grant. But if you're part of it, then you have the opportunity. So before us then, if you don't have any other questions, is a sample resolution that we can direct staff to prepare to bring before us.
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay?
I agree that we have to participate to get the funding grant.
Yeah.
And the goal is, I think, far more achievable, because I believe we've talked many times on the record at this council that we have a lot of affordable housing because our housing stock is older. And some of the newer product that's coming in, this one project that we just spoke of, I think had 132 units. Does that sound about right?
Are you talking about the Healy Ramey?
No, the County Road 5 in McAndrews, the project that just
The
came in
project
last
that
month.
this,
Yeah.
yeah.
Property.
That would be half of our entire 10-year decade goal in one project
Yeah.
if that could get funded and we could find ways to work with CDA and your department to make it work. That'd be great, because I'm a big believer that that's a housing product that we don't necessarily offer. And this is, it's maybe because we have so much older product right now, but newer, few more amenities, a little bit more modern design, workforce housing is missing in Burnsville. We sort of have now this market rate, higher end product. We have lots of affordable older product, and we have some, new market rate, but we don't really have any new workforce to offer. So
We have some apartment buildings that are reinvesting into it. What's Parkview now? Parkview Flats. And so they're adding more amenities and updating. So, but that's not new, that's updated and improved. Yeah, so, yeah, but this is it. So I see, Kara, are you in favor of the resolution?
I would be in favor of us being on slightly less of the losing end of fiscal disparities. That's what I would like.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just be blunt about that.
get some of what
We
got back.
historically are a donor, and, I would make the case that our money could very effectively be used in our community, and we do have projects and things that we have needs for. So flat out, I'm not a fan of fiscal disparities. I'm not. But I also get that you're just gonna take this money anyway. So with ill grace, I will say yes.
Okay. Vince?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to remove ourselves from an opportunity to apply if we're going to be paying it anyways. And as Tara stated, they're not going to come and, wag their fist at us if we don't meet our goals. They're goals, but they're not sanctioned goals. And like we've all discussed, we're likely to meet those goals in the next 10 years, maybe the next 5 as is. So I want Tara to go and be our best friend at the Met Council and get us some yeses.
City Manager Lee?
That's your goal.
City Manager Lee, there's a consensus to,
Oh, can we put that in our resolution? That we have a goal and then we can have you have a goal?
yeah.
Goal of how
So,
many dollars will fund projects in Burnsville?
City Manager
I'm
Lee,
sure.
you have the
Awesome.
consensus of
I
the
would love
council
that.
to bring back the resolution for adoption.
We do.
Okay, thank you
Just
so
the
much,
tech-
Tara,
Thank
for
you
coming
very
in.
much.
Madam
Really
Mayor, could I ask
appreciate it.
one parting question of our
Yes.
presenter? Do you know what Lakeville's goal in the next 10 years is? I'm just really curious. For my good friends on the city council down there, I'd like to know how they're gonna get there.
Asking for a friend.
I don't usually bring my laptop, but I knew there was too much data for me to remember off the top of my head. Okay, so I can tell you that the 2011 to 2020 goals for affordable housing for Lakeville were 1,582 to 2,260. So that was this decade's goal for them.
Did they get close?
I could find that out too, but I'd have to look in a different spot.
That was sort of a loaded question, I apologize.
I know the answer is no, but I don't know how much. Their 2021 to 2030 affordable housing goals are 778 through 1,414. A lot of that is a product of less forecasted growth for this coming decade than the past decade, which again was sort of inflated and didn't anticipate the Great Recession.
So is there a cumulative there? They have to make up for what they missed the
More
last
open
decade?
land. They have a lot of green space. Yeah,
Not brownfield.
yeah, they're, yeah,
It accumulates, right?
yeah.
It does not accumulate.
Well, that's too
Dang
bad.
it, dang it.
No,
And also, I do appreciate, and I did hear you when you said that you were looking to get more of these awards, you know, out to the suburbs and not just like that tight little center ring. And
Yeah.
so I do hear that, and I do appreciate that, so thank you for that.
It's a huge priority of
Thank you.
mine in this role.
yeah,
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
then,
makes a
then you'll
difference.
see me happier, right?
yeah. So, Ms. Beard, thank you so much for
Thank you
coming
all.
in. We appreciate your report.
Should see you once
Well
every
done.
10 years.
Thank you.
You may not have been in that role very long, but you sound like you've been doing it for 20 years. You really, and you said,
Patrick,
I'm
can
not
you
good
write
with
that down?
numbers, but you really did a great job, like you had all of this off the top of your head. So you're clearly very passionate about
I
what
am.
you're doing, very successful at it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Very nicely done. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, and this is the discussion on Experience Burnsville. And presenting this evening is Amy Burrell, the Executive Director, and the Chair of the Experience Burnsville Board, Dan McElroy. So,
Two presenters, so where would you like us?
Jenny?
Right
Yeah.
here and right here.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, if I could just kick us
Yes,
off real quick.
please.
Just for those watching, this is an item that's a follow-up from the all-day, your council's all-day work session.
Yep.
You had asked that there be a future discussion on two things regarding Experience Burnsville and the contract that we have with them. You wanted to see a marketing campaign that has had some more specificity and was very clear. And then you also wanted to review the agreement to make sure it was relevant and expectations were clear with cohesive marketing with the city. So with that, Amy and Dan McElroy from Experience Burnsville will start in with the marketing information, and then I'll follow up with highlights of the agreement changes that are before you.
All
Jenny,
right.
if I could just ask to refresh my memory, on what date was that all-day work session?
January
January.
31st.
January 31st.
Pre-COVID,
So how the world has changed since
Yeah.
January 21st.
It sure has.
We'll ask,
Yeah. So welcome, Amy and Dan. Thank you so much, and to the Board of Directors of Experience Burnsville who are here, welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We thought we'd kick off this evening with an overview, very high level. In your background, you received our marketing plan and marketing outcomes. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that as well.
if I could just interject, what we call a marketing plan and timeline is what some agencies might call a campaign. But this is, and we're going to show you at a relatively high level, I assure you, there's all the detail you could imagine available. But when Councilmember Schultz asked, where is the campaign, our plan is our campaign.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
the current situation with the hospitality and leisure industry, since earlier this year, we have been working in phases. Our initial phase for recovery in the tourism and hospitality industry really began in summer of 2020. And it began on a very localized level. Day trips, really the drive market. We really focused in our efforts for a 250-mile radius. And then there's been some domestic leisure flying that has taken place. But as you've seen in the news, there hasn't been a whole lot of movement. We entered, or will be entering the second phase of recovery beginning in the first quarter of 2021. And that will start with essential meetings, small and medium events, and then more regional international travel. So again, shorter flights. And then the final phase of recovery, if things go as projected, will begin in the third quarter of 2021. And that's when we will hopefully be able to host larger events. And then we'll have more lift with our air service to broader international markets. The return to normal volumes, so pre-COVID levels in travel and hospitality, are not projected until 2023. To give you an idea of where we're at with our average daily rate and hotel occupancy, in the Minneapolis South area, as compared to in parentheses Minneapolis, Our average daily rate this July, which is one of our historically higher revenue months, and what the hotels usually charge the most because of the impact, $87, where Minneapolis is $94. A year ago, we were at $117 on average, and Minneapolis is typically at around $170. Hotel occupancy is around 44%. Burnsville's been slightly lower than that on average in my conversations with our hoteliers. Minneapolis is at 15% occupancy. So those are a lot of vacant hotel rooms in the Minneapolis area. And then you can see the numbers in July, 74% and almost 79%. Am I able to take my mask off when I'm presenting?
You can,
Is that okay?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you. Okay, that's a lot better.
yeah.
Okay.
Tara did.
Okay, thank you. So our funding, Experience Burnsville is a destination marketing organization, and we're funded almost entirely through local option lodging tax. So with limited overnight hotel stays, lower occupancy levels and lower average daily rate, that has an impact on the lodging tax that is collected by our hotels and then through the city of Burnsville. Here's a global idea of the impact of the devastation for the hotel industry. 8 in 10 hotel rooms are empty. 2020 is projected to be the worst year on record for hotel occupancy, and 70% of hotel employees have either been laid off or furloughed. So we're losing a lot of industry, institutional knowledge and expertise to this global pandemic, and people are leaving the travel and tourism industry at record amounts. So that's going to have a long-term impact on us as well. Here's an idea, just a snapshot of the financial impact. So the top bar on the left-hand side, the darker blue, that was our lodging tax revenue in 2018 at the end of August. Then next is 2019 and where we're at today as of the end of August. That represents around $138,000. Our organization, as we started out the year and the pandemic hit, we have experienced a 40% decrease in our staffing levels. Year to date, we have a 41% decrease in our lodging tax revenue. If you were to take the months of April through September, or August, I should say, because we don't have our September numbers yet, it's closer to a 60% decrease in the lodging tax. And we've really relied heavily on a couple of our vendor partnerships to help us with our creative. We have the vision, we know Burnsville the best, and then we work with them to help us establish creative and digital strategies, and then staff, myself and Sydney, really work on the implementation and the execution of that. And here's an idea who we partner with. Our staff, like I said, it's myself and our marketing coordinator, who's now part-time. And then our primary vendors are 26 Digital and WA Fisher. The 2020 plan, an overview of our marketing and promotion initiatives. So 2020 was starting out very promising. We were really looking for a record year in travel and hospitality with average daily rate and occupancy. We launched our brand new website in late January. We were really excited about that. We used a lot of our analytics, our visitor profile, our branding, our taglines to develop this new interactive website. And then March happened. And in March, we really kind of took our plans for 2020 and threw them in the garbage can. Not literally, but pretty much. We took that time to really pause and assess what is the current situation with the virus, with travel, with stay-at-home orders. And what's the consumer sentiment? Do people even want to travel right now? Are they comfortable staying in a hotel or going to a restaurant? We again relied heavily on our partnerships with our vendors, the research that we have, our analytics, education through our global partners through Destinations International and U.S. Travel Association, And then we started to really build our new content and creative and did an audit and really looked at all the plans that we had in place and that we kind of tossed to the wayside. Then with the plan, we strategized, we prioritized, and we began creating. And when we began creating, we kept it on a very local basis, really focused on the Burnsville residents. They're at home now. They're doing school from home. So what activities can they do socially distanced in a safe and healthy manner to get them outside and experiencing parts of Burnsville that they might not have otherwise experienced? Then we began to adapt. Our organization needed to continue to be fluid and to be nimble, to be able to change on a dime. We had to accept change, that what we had planned and what we had been doing and had great success over the most recent years, we had to change all that. And then it was really important for us in our industry to be kind and to have really positive messages emanating from Experience Burnsville, because a lot of our friends and our colleagues were losing their jobs and losing their businesses. And then we wanted to continue to be viable. So we needed to have good timing. We needed to be able to activate and capitalize when people are ready to travel again and to get outside of the home. Part of our strategy was to really dial in our geographic audience. We are now really focused on a 250-mile radius from the Burnsville area, so a really strong drive market, but it still encourages overnight stays in our hotel motels. And part of our recovery initiatives was building different content on our website, like recreating a date night at home in Burnsville. We did puzzles, we did bingo cards, we did scavenger hunts. All with the sense to really market and promote all the amenities that Burnsville offers. And again, targeting the locals, but also very enticing for those that just really wanted to get out of their house and get in the car and drive and go stay overnight somewhere. During our recovery, we really thought about what makes Burnsville a great community to visit, to live, to do business. And we came up with locally strong. We're a very strong, determined community. So we've created a blog series that is going to focus on hospitality businesses or hospitality individuals that have really recreated and reinvented themselves during the pandemic and what their outlook is as the recovery continues. So our first blog focused on Jensen's Cafe with Doran and Brian. We are now working on a blog to focus on, to highlight T&J Restaurant, the new sushi restaurant in the former Brugger's Bagels location. Chianti Grill will be highlighted this year, as well as Olivia's Organic Cafe. And then with the blogs, we also do a content activation program on social media to drive home that messaging and to direct traffic to our website. We continued with our newsletter. We have a fairly strong e-newsletter list, that our database that we've been building over the past handful of years. And we normally have a very leisure focus, but then we turn that newsletter, that resource, into a way to communicate with our hospitality community. In addition, we, as part of our strategic plan this year, we were going to host a an in-person, not used to saying in-person meeting, with 26 Digital to educate and train our hospitality partners on the effectiveness of social media and digital advertising. With the onset of COVID, we decided to make that a 3-part virtual series. So we had great attendance with that, and we recorded all the web series, and we've been able to share that with our hospitality partners, as well as refer back to it as staff ourselves. And here is an overlook of our marketing calendar, or the different campaigns that we've done year to date. It doesn't really include our daily social media posts, because that would be very overwhelming and a great deal of detail, but hopefully you all follow along with us on social and you are aware of what activity we do have to market and promote Burnsville. Next, I wanted to show some of our creative examples, sort of our new look with our new brand, Local Flavor, Local Flair. Here's a digital billboard digital signage that we started with at the Ames Center. And the goal was to change it on a seasonal basis so we could really highlight the 4 different seasons here in Burnsville. Here's some of the promotions that we did at the onset of COVID with our bingo card, the theme puzzles, and the scavenger hunt. And we're currently working on updating all that for fall and then for winter, as people are still at learning from home. And here's a sample of some of the Facebook and Instagram ads that we did as part of our content activation campaigns this year, highlighting the outdoor recreation. That photo was taken pre-COVID at Buck Hill. And then, you know, our restaurants, the unique attraction of the Burnsville Skate Park, and then the relief sessions that happened in July, August, and the beginning of September. Our engagement as a community partner is very important, that our staff and our board have a presence in our community on a local basis as well as globally. So we have been really partnering closely this year with the city and the Chamber of Commerce. Some of the initiatives there include Small Business Week. With the Chamber, we've been doing convening hospitality Zoom meetings with the different segments in the hospitality industry. We've did some promotions around National Travel and Tourism Week, the Great American Takeout. We distributed face masks and alcohol wipes to businesses in partnership with the Chamber and City. Tour de Flavor, that was a really fun promotion. The CARES Act, the grant, which we are so grateful and appreciative of, and then a sample of our newsletter. And part of our goal is to continue building our promotional assets, and that is going out to our various hospitality businesses that maybe can't otherwise afford professional photography, and we've partnered with our photographer over the years, and now we've created these segments called mini sessions where we go out and we spend ideally less than an hour, and we get in, we shoot, and then we get out. So places that we've been this year are the new deck at Buck Hill, Buck 54, the Lions Park, T&J Restaurant, Olivia's, tennis, mountain biking. We did a blog earlier this year on the public art features in Burnsville, which was wildly successful, of course, and the skate park. So those are just a variety of those. Future plans and beyond. So for the remainder of the year, we, of course, are working on amending our agreement with the city of Burnsville. Upcoming next week, we have our Board of Directors retreat, where the board will revisit our strategies and we'll take a look at our draft budget and really set the tone for 2021 and beyond. And based on that, then we've already started working on our marketing plan for next year, but given the state of our funding, we're going to have to be very selective on what we can choose and deliver upon and what's going to have a really good impact, not only to drive overnight stays in our hotel motels, but to help promote the community as well. And then the remainder of the year, we are working on some additional blogs and then content activation campaigns to focus on winter activities, socially distanced, and then holiday shopping and events that are available. We're going to continue with our locally strong blog, like as I'd mentioned, and then also with our newsletter. Then looking forward to 2021, some considerations that we are looking at is an enhancement to our e-newsletter. It's a great way to meet people and to get our information in their hands at an affordable investment. So again, focusing on leisure travelers on a bi-monthly basis. This is new, focusing on the local market, so building a database of Burnsville residents and businesses that want to receive information on events happening and attractions in the city, and then continuing with our quarterly partners newsletter. So that's focused on our hotel and our restaurants, attractions, those type of businesses. We're going to continue to engage our social media channels with the primary focus on Facebook and Instagram. Those are the most popular pages that we have and where we get the most engagement. So again, the most bang for our buck. Lead generation, we want to continue to build our databases with qualified users. So we have a lead gen program that we're looking to do through Facebook to acquire those email addresses. And then a seasonal awareness campaign. So the frequency may decrease of our blogs and content in 2021, but it'll have a really more global seasonal appeal. And I think a more dialed-in message to the end user to influence visitation. Continuing again, like I said, locally strong blog, and then we're adding a more robust monthly reporting dashboard, which we're partnering with 26 Digital on that to help create. That was something that came out of the edits throughout the agreement, so I wanted to make sure we included that.
And
Then
that's
as we-
available, when you have the dashboard, it will be on your website, and so it can be accessed?
I don't know that we'd have it on our website, but it would definitely be shared with our board of directors and city council and stakeholders.
Okay,
So that would probably
And
be
so city
something that
staff-
we would add to our hospitality partner
Yeah.
e-newsletter,
yeah.
so that they have that information.
Yeah.
And if they want to collaborate with us on any promotions, that we're happy to collaborate and partner.
That's great.
To have a broader reach. Budgeting. So we have, as we started 2021, we had some reserves built, about a 5-month reserve. Our policy is for about a 3-month, but we had a bit healthier reserve, and we had some money in our savings account. With the onset of COVID, we have taken some money out of our savings as we had budgeted last year when we were going through the process. But the outlook for tourism looks to be about the same until about 2023. So the more we invest down our reserves and our savings account, they'll be gone, and so we're not in a position right now to really build those. So how do we continue to market and promote Burnsville in the most positive way while maintaining some level of reserves because in case of crisis, and then looking at staffing. With 1.5 people, we're still doing the work of 2.5. And is that sustainable? And then what does that look like next year and years to come? And then the balance, is we have to have balance. What are the primary focus of our destination marketing organization as it aligns with the state statute that talks about the way we're funded and the purpose of lodging tax with our new agreement, and then how do we sustain that moving forward? So in closing, I just want to say that we appreciate the partnership and the collaboration that we have with the city council and with city staff, and that we really look forward to building this path forward, and we want to continue to be your partner in this. So with that, I'm available for question. Otherwise, Dan McElroy, if you have anything. you'd like to
Councilmember
add.
Gustafson?
Amy, he mentioned something about events, calendars and that. Are you looking to become a clearinghouse for events for the city that we can all go to and see what's going on?
Councilmember Gustafson and Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is something that was in addition to the agreement, the revision of the agreement. Jenny Faulkner and I have been emailing back and forth on that, wondering what that really looks like. There's definitely possibilities that we could be the clearinghouse or the owner, if you will, manager of a more community-centric. My question came up with how would we do that in a very favorable way? And is this something that businesses and residents are wanting? And so I think that there's opportunity to engage the community to find out exactly what information they're looking for. And then based on that, further discussion on if we update our website or add a new landing page. Do we create a portal where Art and All That Jazz would upload the information to populate our website? So there's a lot of different opportunities there, and they all have a price tag.
Yeah.
So on the priority level, where does that fall within the scope of service?
A lot having to do with the details when you have to look at the school district, the Chamber of Commerce, and everything else in the community. And where do you draw the line with regard to becoming all of that? But I think that's something that the board can speak to, and when you're doing your strategic plan, and Dan, you had your hand up, you wanted to address that.
This is an issue that has received a fair amount of attention when I was at Hospitality Minnesota. A number of communities tried to develop comprehensive community calendars that may include their amateur athletics, their school groups, other volunteer issues. Some even tried to get church calendars integrated into it. Minnesota School Boards Association probably went the farthest with this, and I will check with them to see what they ultimately invested. But during this COVID period, they have put it lower on their priority list, but we'll see what software tool they may have available. When I first went to city government in 1990, state government rather, in 1995, Arnie Carlson had launched an effort called Market Minnesota. It was an effort to have all the state agencies, the Minnesota Historical Society and others collaborate. The first fruit from that was bore fruit 30 years later with the adoption of a single logo with taglines, the blue and green MN, and then Deed has their Positively Minnesota, and Historical Society puts their level on it. They have not attempted a statewide calendar, but I know it is on their long-term project. It's not simple. And it gets to the distinction of organizations that have staff, like the city government and the school district, and those that are all volunteer, like BAA or Apple Valley Athletics or the Community Theater or Dakota Valley Civic Orchestra, and what we can expect for cooperation. I don't foresee with the lodging tax situation the way it is that we'll have a lot of resource to put that. We'll try with some volunteers to see what we can do to be helpful.
Okay, thank you. I have two more follow-up questions,
Okay.
please. What do you have for your measurables for success with how you're doing things now? How do we know we're being effective at doing that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
What are your measurables you use for your success in your current, I know things have changed totally and you're in a whole different thing. Are you finding ways to measure what's going on to see if we're actually getting traction and bringing people to our city to do things?
So we utilize our analytics, Google Analytics, the social media channels have analytics, and we do a year-to-year by month comparison that, if we, are we higher, have we had a greater reach on Facebook in August of 2020 over August of 2019? What activities have we executed that would increase traffic to our website? So this year we do a monthly blog and content activation, and that's something that we partner with 26 Digital on. And then we also do an internal blog, and we do our own Facebook ad on that at a much lower investment level. So, our bread and butter is really driving traffic to our website for our engagement. So that is our primary focus.
And we report to you on that in the dashboard and the reports you get that show the number of page views, the time on page, the number of likes and new friends that we may have on our social media. And then ultimately, the measurable is occupancy and ADR. We are a little better than some other communities, like downtown Minneapolis, that's just really in deep yogurt. We're not nearly where we'd like to be.
Thank you. And one last question. Are hotels engaged with the CVB right now, with what you're trying to get done here? I know you used to have all these meetings all the time with them, and with COVID, it's much more difficult to do, but.
Yeah, so we reach out regularly via email and phone calls. I call our hotel operators. We also are doing the convening hospitality meetings in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. We have one of those tomorrow morning where our guest speaker is someone from Hospitality Minnesota. And the meetings that you were referring to were great meetings that we had a handful of years ago. And as the recession happened and hotels had fewer staff to send to the various meetings, a lot of them are small limited service hotels and they're owner operated. So you're running the hotel, you're doing the front desk, and you're flipping over rooms. So the attendance really decreased, but we did ask, and the hotels really like the information that we send them, and then just the one-on-one phone calls and messages that we send.
And you have hotel industry folks on your board.
Yes, we have 2 hotel representatives on our board of directors currently. And then Councilmember Gustafson, about events, I was thinking about this. Our Facebook page is an excellent resource for us to be able to build an event calendar, in which we really try to get to. I, in the evenings, sit on Facebook and try to add events. So if, like the relief sessions, for example, had a Facebook event, we can add that to our event calendar. And that's sort of a low-hanging fruit way to build a more robust community calendar. So Sydney and I tried to do that. That was one of Bree's responsibilities, roles. And with her departure, Sydney and I are trying to pick up the pieces and get that added. But as we, continue to recover and more events happen, our own event calendar on our website will continue to build, hopefully back to the levels that it was pre-COVID.
And some of the events we can promote are things, for example, at Ames Center, which is currently not having events. Softball tournaments and soccer tournaments and hockey tournaments have all been big events that we can help with. Most of them haven't occurred. The destination drivers, and whether they're weddings or funerals or family reunions, we believe that those will come back to normal in 22 and 23. But there hasn't been a lot to put on a calendar since St. Patrick's Day. I can always remember when the lockdown began because it was on an Irishman's high holy day.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
What database are you using for the back end of your website?
We have WordPress.
Oh, okay. Then there's actually like several ways that you can tie in multi-users onto a back-end calendar. It would just be you defining who you put in that group of what groups have events that are destination drivers. And then they can all have separate logins which load their information in, but it doesn't go live until you say yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
good,
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
I mean, like it sucks that we don't have a lot to put on the calendar right now, but maybe this is the time when there's not a lot of busyness to prepare for that with all of your, partner organizations that could have something to eventually load on there. Because when I'm looking at this, having a kind of a one-stop place for most of our major events, and no, I'm not getting down into church calendars and that type of thing. That would be very valuable. And then that is something that you could really drive people towards. In the other types of marketing you do and that type of thing, because that's, I know my frustration level when I'm going to travel or I'm looking for something to do and the information is absolutely fragmented. If I have to spend more than 30 seconds and I can't find something right away, I say screw it and I go to something else. And so people's attention span for searching for things is beyond low.
Right.
Like the threshold is like on the floor. So anything that you can do to make that extremely readily accessible, I think would be of value to our city. And then I don't know the answer to this, and I will probably be told, Kara, that's a terrible idea, but I'm gonna ask our city manager anyway. If Experience Burnsville is our partner organization and we are contracting with them, are we able to lend some of our IT expertise to them?
Kara, that's not a terrible idea.
Oh.
Mayor and council member, I don't know, that's something we've been asked to do. I mean, we've looked at Experience Burnsville as, they're in
Right, we
charge of
pay
it.
them to do
You
stuff.
got it.
I
You got
get
it.
it.
And-
Like, I
And
get
certainly,
that.
can we
Yeah.
rethink about what we want to do? How does that partnership look? Yeah, that's why the agreement is going to be important to define what does that look like. So, I haven't,
Would you hate that, or would you be fine with that?
Councilmember Schultz, members of the council, we actually, city IT used to be our IT support.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yep,
Yeah.
and then.
there was a time when we were.
And then when the recession, and budget cuts and staffing cuts here at city,
Yep.
that is when that partnership terminated, and then we sought our own IT, support and company. So we have had,
Yep.
when I started, we had a humongous closet server
Yeah.
tower that Tom Venables
Yeah.
helped us,
Yeah, we did.
attain. So, yes,
Yeah.
we've
And-
been down that road, and, you know.
And it worked well.
Yeah, it worked well. I mean, with 1.5 staff people, we don't have a great,
Yeah.
Right.
great need for IT services. You know, we've integrated everything into the cloud with Office 365, so, we're slowly getting there. Are we at the level where the city is? Probably not.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. So it's all, again, prioritizing, you know, we're a marketing organization. So I want to put all of our efforts, my time, into marketing, not necessarily, I still have to manage the organization, HR, payroll, accounts payable, all that stuff.
The house stuff.
But I really want to focus
Yeah.
into the marketing and promotion. So it's definitely a conversation.
And
that we can have.
marketing and promotions is an art. So in try to understand what the return is on all of that is how many people show up and so forth. But if you don't have it out there, then they don't know. But driving traffic to the destination is what we need to do. So, any other questions? Dan Keeley?
An observation and a few questions, if I may. Well, first and foremost, after going through all this background, and I know this really started maybe last year with some discussions, I have to stop and think about what we've been putting you through the last few months with a new contract, which had a lot of changes in it, and realize that with the pandemic, you had you lost a couple folks on your staff. You went from 4 to 2. And your revenue is taking a nosedive, and yet we're sort of almost conducting business as usual, trying to get a new contract arrangement done, get a new plan together, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I feel like I should apologize that maybe we kept pressing forward on something that probably
Yeah.
we should have pulled back and said,
Yeah.
why don't we give you
Some
till
breathing
next
room.
year, let's just operate status quo in your old contract, and what can we do to help you survive? Now, we did provide a grant, which is great. It's a one-time Band-Aid. It's not a long-term solution. And so you still have a massive revenue challenge, given your presentation and everything that we've read about the industry. So I guess in a way, I'm saying, I'm sorry we kind of kept pushing on this. We probably should have pulled back. And at a time like this, I think we're expecting a lot out of an operation that has half the people and less than half of the money to do your job. So I apologize. I really appreciate your presentation because there's a couple things I gleaned out of it that for whatever the reason I didn't get in your previous presentations for over the last 12 years. How long have you been there?
14 years.
14 years. Well, I've been here 14 years, so I've been here ever since you've been doing presentations, and somehow the whole heads and beds thing didn't sink in the way I should have, because we've been talking about over the last year, how does the CVB promote more of the stuff that's going on? Because we're so excited about all these new things that we're doing in the city. But how many of those new things that are going on in the city are actually driving overnight hotel stays, which is where your 100% dependency comes in, and I want to touch on that as my last question. And so your focus has to be to bring people into the city to stay overnight, or you have no revenues, right? Or your revenues go down, which means your ability to do what many of us, including me, want is, well, let's make sure that the art and all that jazz and the relief series and the race and the fire muster and the party on the plaza and all these things get your marketing channels and media attention to help spread the word. You can do that as long as you have this solid base of revenue coming from heads and beds. Otherwise, you can't do anything. So that sort of really hit home as I was kind of getting caught up into, what else can you do, right, to talk about the city and get more people excited about wanting to live here, right, creating a desire to live here. So Dan, you want to touch on
Well,
something
I
before I go?
should comment that we have to put heads in beds or we don't have money to do anything else.
Great.
We are aware that we have other opportunities and ways to be of service, both to city government and city community. One of the things we are doing is to use the You Belong in Beeville tag on virtually everything we use. We don't use it exclusively. Local flavor, local flair may also be there, or other of our tags. But we've been, I hope, your best partner in using You Belong in Beeville. Some of our destination drivers are local, and I mentioned weddings and unfortunately funerals and family reunions and tournaments. Some are regional in nature, like Valley Fair and the Renaissance Festival and the County Fair and the State Fair and even the Steele County Fair, professional athletics, professional theater. And we can't control, none of us can control when they start to get back to normal. We hope it will be in second quarter of next year, it may be third or even fourth quarter before they're back to normal. So some of what Amy and I would talk about as destination drivers or business drivers are within our control, and many are not.
Thank you. Can any of us even imagine the state fair being canceled for a second year?
It's only
Just can't even
happened,
conceive that.
the only time it happened was in
Knock on wood,
1945 and
Dan.
1946.
Don't just say that and leave
Not
it.
gonna happen.
I'm
we
deeply
need a
hopeful it
vaccine.
won't happen, but I don't think it's out of the question.
Yeah, that's really, as this sort of,
Well, in
reaches into your industry, especially, you start to think about that.
1946, it was canceled because of the polio epidemic.
Yeah.
In 1945, it was canceled because of travel restrictions at the end of World War II, and travel resources were needed to get troops back home.
Yeah.
Obviously, in 2020, we canceled the state fair entirely
COVID.
because of the pandemic and the risk of becoming a super spreader event. I'm hopeful we'll know more and know enough, and Jay Hammer is a friend of mine, the general manager at the state fair. And I suppose if I tried to get him to give me a number, he's 60 or 70% certain we're going to have a normal or near normal fair, but that's not 100.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So my first question is, are you comfortable at the language that's been worked on till today in this new contract? I mean, do you feel good about it? Do you feel you could fulfill the spirit of this new agreement and all of the new entries that are part of it?
We weren't comfortable with the first draft, then we went to a second draft, and we got a little more comfortable. I think we're on a third draft, which is better. I suspect that we'll be working with Jenny, and there may be a few more changes, but we're getting there.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I would just ask, as we move forward, and the unknown is before all of us, is, the more we can collaborate and communicate as partners, and we're on the same page, the better we can market and promote our destination, our community. So, I think that's key moving forward.
Agreed.
Yeah.
If we want a closer relationship, we have to have a closer relationship, right? You need to be at the table in
Yeah.
everything that we're doing and all of these events and stuff that are going on. Well, thank you. That's good, considering, what you've gone through the last 6 months, like everybody else. But, we're really speaking to a hotel or a restaurant, or an event center. That's what you live and die off of, obviously, with the hotel tax. But restaurants and events are so integrated in what you do it's like having a hoteler in front of us going, hey, can you do better, right? And you're really down. I mean, you really have been beaten down by the pandemic, and it's been it's a challenging time to go through a contract of this nature to this degree. So anyway, I appreciate your willingness to move forward. A couple other questions. What are you hearing from other CVBs around the country? Because your presentation sort of highlighted the really bad situation going on in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So they're not really a good resource to find out how they're trying to, although they might have come up with some incredible ideas. But what are you hearing around the country from your peer group as far as what other CVBs have done to try and create some excitement and new reasons to, focus on their cities, et cetera?
Very good question, Councilmember. I think the global message is that we need to convey gentle optimism. That, we are still in the midst of this pandemic and people are still afraid to travel. And then people that are traveling are being travel shamed for traveling. So there's a lot of moving pieces in this whole, our new universe. So that's primarily it. The majority of CVBs, when the pandemic was first upon us, really took a pause a lot. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but many paused completely, and they really reassessed. They furloughed and laid off staff, and they cut spending, but for the operation of their organization. We had a different approach to that because that is when our hospitality partners need us the most, is when something happens like a pandemic or 9/11, events like that. So I think moving forward, we rely as DMOs on other organizations' events and businesses and hospitality and their willingness to be open for visitors. So as we begin to open up Minnesota, hopefully, and people are comfortable traveling again, we're going to be there ready with our messaging and ready to welcome them back. Throughout the summer months, we've had several renditions of our marketing plan and our strategies and blogs that we had outlines for, and things happened and gets tossed out, cancellation of the State Fair, cancellation of the Renaissance, Valley Fair not opening, Mall of America opening, but on a limited
Our
basis.
Buck Hill concert series.
Yeah. So, just being nimble and being able to adjust with the times, if you will, or adjust with the events and the businesses that are open.
Thank you. Lastly, when you look at a model that is dependent on one single revenue source, it makes you nervous. And up until the pandemic, it was okay. It fluctuated a little bit, but it was good in 2018. It appears that was your peak. But it's at times like this, when that revenue source is crippled, that you start to think, maybe we need to invest in a broader model or diversify our revenue base. Are you having any discussions with partner organizations, with and that could be the chamber, and CVBs and chambers have got a very close relationship in a lot of cities, but where you can look at exploring some additional revenue models, even if things come back in 2023, which is, I think, very unfortunate that industry, your industry has to wait that long. I hope something bounces back a lot faster than that. But the reality is you're planning for a very, slow recovery. I'm reading a lot of your industry-related news and articles and publications that are talking about a lot of these types of partnerships with the local economic development authority, the chamber, other organizations, the hospitality, the hotel, the restaurants. I mean, I see what you're doing. The hotels are bringing in the revenue, but you're benefiting a lot of other entities, restaurants and event centers that aren't contributing to. They're basically harvesting from your effort that the hotels are funding. So maybe there's some some conversations to explore there as we kind of get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good one to have right now, but, you
Because
know,
nobody has anything, but, and I don't know, Dan, when you were the president of the Tourism and Retail Organization, because you even had to address all of that with regard to partnerships and so forth.
I've had several people accuse me of perfect timing in having retired in July of 2018 and not having been in that position during the pandemic. I will tell you that our bylaws had prohibited our having members or member dues or member promotions.
That's
And
right.
the board took that out of the bylaws, and we're not,
Yep,
we don't want to
that's right.
compete with the chamber at this time, but that doesn't mean that at some point in the future, there may be a way to get some revenue help from other businesses. I will tell you, the smart thing that Mayor Couts and other leaders have done was to build reserves in the organization. And the
Yep.
fact that we had
Yep,
5 or 6 months of reserve kind of in our primary accounts and some additional savings, we've been able to backfill some of that with the 2 part-time grants. But absent that, we wouldn't be able to be in a position to do the work going forward. Councilmember Keel, you asked if there was anything you could do to help. We did place an ask with Ames Center management about the rent that we currently pay at Ames Center. We're not able to really use the office very much because of the work from home order and Ames Center being largely closed. We continue to pay the rent because we need a place for our furniture and our database and our supplies and all of the things that we will desperately need as we relaunch. But if the city would be in a position to consider an adjustment to the rent for 21, that would be helpful.
okay.
yep, I think in that case, we're a landlord like any other landlord that in the current pandemic crisis, they've had to come to the table to be able to, keep a long-term tenant or help in some way, shape, or form. So I think it's a fair conversation.
And we made adjustments to our liquor license holders,
Yep, we help.
so we help them. So there are things that we can, if we say that we'll be fair and just with everybody that we work with,
Appreciate that.
that would be something. Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. Amy, you had mentioned something earlier that I wanted to focus on as being, I think, a key component to your success, and that was the collaboration and communication piece of this. And I do owe you a phone call still.
Maybe that was geared towards you. No.
Well, you looked at me when you said it, so. Just
I'm
know that
still waiting.
I'm not calling you back. I'm not calling everybody here back, so.
That's the truth.
Won't call you back. It's not gonna happen.
Can I interject just a
Facebook
Might text you
suggestion?
at 2 in the
Little
morning.
kids.
I got a text from someone who wasn't able to hear most of what you said, Mr. McElroy, so maybe whoever is speaking, slide the mask aside so the microphone can better pick up what you're saying. You said a lot of great stuff, and unfortunately, our audience that's tuning in can't hear it very well.
All right. I will try to remember to do that.
I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry. I wanted to make sure they could hear what you're saying.
Collaboration. Oh, I was gonna say, so even just since I started here, I've noticed a tangible difference in just the overall relationships between this organization and the chamber and even the festivals, as opposed to I'm not attributing any of this to me, but just saying that I've noticed a difference in the interaction that the CVB has had with these other groups. So that is very important. The other things I wanted to quick touch on was that I know that the calendar does seem like a big undertaking, but the more that I think about that, and the more that I think about the CVB being kind of the lead on that, the more it makes sense to me. When I think about where people that aren't from here are going to likely go first to see what to do here, I would imagine they would probably go to you first. And if there's an easy way to get that integrated, I think that's a wonderful idea and a huge asset for people coming in, and I think it speaks directly to what a CVB is trying to accomplish. And to what I think Kara said is, I don't know that we need to get down to church calendars, but even if we're targeting, sports tournaments and not necessarily standard games, but, where people are coming in from greater Minnesota for tournaments, having that available to them makes sense. When I look at our background and I see the other items under deliverables and activities proposed, the only other item I see where there might be some discomfort was the proactively lead tourism placemaking in the city. And I don't know if, Amy, you want to speak to that, or Jenny, but maybe just expand on what that kind of means and then what the reaction to that item is.
Yes, sorry, my glasses fogged
Amy?
up, so.
You can take your mask off.
Yeah. You have to take your mask off so people can, yeah.
Councilmember Workman, members of the council, tourism placemaking, it's an important part of a destination. Everyone wants that Instagrammable moment, whether it's next to the Bean or the Spoon and Cherry or Centrifuge or the Ames horses, you know, that type of thing. I think where we were coming from is that we are a marketing organization, and we would be thrilled to continue to market placemaking opportunities within our destination. Is the the CVB the best to lead the effort in creating placemaking? As the staff person, I would say we are not. We, as an organization, don't own land or buildings or parks, or we don't own space. You know, we own computers and desks. You know, and
talented people.
Thank you. Yeah. So
I'm sorry, and
that was-
talented people.
Thank you, because I agree.
So, you know, that was where our point on that addition was coming from. It's not that we are not supportive, we would support and continue to support placemaking opportunities, just not with us being the lead on it. We can be the lead promoter, we'll take that any day, because that's what we do, that's
what marketing is
And I
about.
think there might be room for something in between there too. You know, and a lot of that placemaking that you speak of, oftentimes I think happens organically and it's not really planned. So maybe there's something in our community that we're not even aware of that is Instagrammable, like a landfill or a quarry.
Okay,
The only other question I had was,
yeah.
we spend a lot of time discussing analytics from our social media, or your social media. But I'm curious, was heads and beds really the primary driver of measurables pre-Facebook and Google Analytics, or how did you measure those things before those resources were available?
Councilmember Workman, members of the council, when I started in 2006, our measurables were the number of phone calls we'd receive on our 800 number and the number of requests we'd receive for our visitor guide.
Yeah.
So we'd place an ad in USA Today
Yeah.
on a Sunday, and Monday morning we'd come in and we'd have dozens of messages requesting our coupon book. And as marketing has changed and developed, so has our analytics. You know, marketing is a sort of a intangible item. You know, you can place an ad somewhere, but you don't know if it's really driving traffic to someone's hotel. You know, there's ways that could be accomplished, you know, to measure and get that information. It is extremely expensive to do. So what we've really relied on is for example, we did a visitor profile study, research
Yeah.
project.
By the university.
And we did it during our shoulder season, so September through February, historically the slower times for visitation to our community and slower hotel stays. And that helped us really define who was traveling here, what they're doing when they're traveling here, what's the age group, how much do they spend on an overnight stay, how much do they spend on a day trip. So then based on that information, we've used that data to help develop our current marketing plan and the geographic and demographic areas that we really target. We were very broad. I'm into Canada and very big footprint of our marketing efforts when I first started, because things were print. And now with digital, we're able to dial that in and target the people that we know like Burnsville. And we can do a lookalike audience with social media. There's, website pixels, not pickles, sorry. Pixels, and, just, we can follow people now. We retarget, we geofence, we do all those types of things. So it's not an exact science on how many people stay overnight in our hotels because of our marketing efforts. We don't have a booking engine on our website. Expedia, Travelocity, they're better at doing all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Skip. He's had his hand up. Skip?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a thought that came to mind as Councilmember Workman was talking about tournaments and things. As you all know, probably, one of the greatest hurdles in putting a calendar together is actually getting the various groups to submit the information. And it's actually a much bigger hurdle than you would think it would be for free advertising. But one of the ways the city could help in the partnership is if you're going to hold a baseball tournament, a softball tournament, a soccer tournament, or anything else, you're going to have to rent city fields. And certainly if the recreation department would either A, alert those groups that this calendar is available, or even better, get all the information together and put it on the calendar themselves, that would certainly go a strong way to, helping get that calendar populated and move forward. And it hopefully would not take that much more effort out of our recreation department.
Okay.
I like that.
Okay, shall I move on to Kara, or are you still asking questions?
I guess I don't have my parting shot would be, I'm not an online professional, but one thing that I've noticed is that the content that gets shared the most often gets noticed the most. And there's gotta be some algorithm out there, whether it be through memes or comedy or heartstrings that, gets content shared that I think has always been more effective than just, passive likes or views. And that's not me micromanaging or telling you to do that. It's just kind of an observation that I've picked up. So thank you for helping me understand some of this better.
Okay, Kara?
A question I have for you, and this deals not just with the fact that you rent space. How would closing the Ames Center for 6 to 8 months affect you and affect hotels, things like that in Burnsville?
If the Ames Center were able to operate with attractions that draw people, the Lutheran Church Women Basement and the
Yeah.
Lori Line Show and a variety of other attractions, those help. Those do put heads in beds. The dance program certainly put heads in beds, and also help our other non-hotel interest restaurants. I'm sorry. I'm used to when people are pointing at me, it's not something as helpful as take my mask down. So if the Ames Center were open but not busy, it doesn't help us much. If they're open and they have activities, it helps a lot. And particularly with the holidays coming up, we know that many people have cabin fever, and whatever the equivalent is, I gotta get out of this place. And I was hopeful that programs that drew bus traffic, like the church basement ladies and the singing nuns and Lori Line and others, we were hoping those could take place.
So my question is, what if it's closed? Closed for 6 to 8 months?
If it's, that's not helpful, but it also, it only helps if it's busy. If it's open and empty, it doesn't help us any. And so I don't know what Brian's hearing from organizers and presenters and people who do the kinds of things that would help us do our job. And Lori, or Amy, do you have anything else you can add? Do you know more?
With the Ames Center staff, thank you. With Ames Center staff, Brian, they're building their event calendar, especially for the holidays. Lori Line is coming, and there's ton of
Got
sold out.
tickets.
Yep, and so there is activity at the Ames Center. I think closing a regional destination such as the Ames Center for an extended period of time would have a long-term impact with the fact that Brian and his staff wouldn't be able to continue their efforts to bring events back into, so it would be a pause in the event calendar. And how long would that take to rebuild the event calendar? And then do you risk the chance of losing events such as Church Basement Ladies or Lori Line? Do they look to other venues for future performances? Because the entertainment industry has been hit hard, just like the hospitality industry, and these artists are hungry and they want to get back out and perform. And now, you know, if we could, the government restrictions on group size, you know, if we can continue to turn the dial and get more people out with higher capacity in a healthy, safe way, that's a win for everyone, in my opinion.
So one of the things that with Experience Burnsville and what you do in highlighting destination areas in the city, you did a piece about Skateville. So our most famous person who came to Burnsville because of Skateville is Katy Perry.
Yep.
So.
But Skip was our most famous person.
So the thing is, you don't know what you don't know, and she wanted to fly under the radar, but I got information from them that she was going to be at Skateville. And she was there with her group.
For a birthday party.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
That was a couple years ago.
yeah. So you never know that when you're marketing the city and you're marketing destinations, what all of that means.
What your net might catch, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, Dan, did you want to address the agreement? Because we got, and I think this is one that you and our staff worked on, and from everything that I understand with the way that we want to work and in terms of the culture within our organization, is we work collaboratively.
I think Jenny has some comments and we can
Yeah.
respond.
Madam Mayor, I was going to go through highlights of the changes, but
Okay,
I
because
know
there's
we're way behind on
blue
time.
highlights and red highlights and purple.
Okay, I'll go through my presentation. I need to change the PowerPoint.
You are so well prepared, you can
I
sanitize
let Jenny
the,
do it. I learned from the expert.
Okay. So a couple of the changes in the agreement, and we went back and forth a couple of times, trying to address some of the comments from the all-day work session from council and presenting those to Experience Burnsville and seeing kind of where we could come to agreement. So the deliverables that have been added to the agreement include analytics on reach, audience, impressions, excuse me, that's gonna be a measurable, including the You Belong Here brand where appropriate collaborating with partners, things that Amy has talked about, the public calendar collaboration, when she talked about some of the stressors on that, proactively working with the city to pursue projects benefiting from tourism, and placemaking, we talked about that. That was something that we threw out there, and Experience Burnsville is happy to support that, but does not feel they should be leading it, as talked about by Amy and Dan. And then we added in measurables. That was something that came up at the all-day work session, and trying to manage expectations, your expectations, because I think that's partially why this came up. And so if we can measure the opportunities or how Experience Burnsville has actively partnered and participated with the city, kind of working more closely together. What does that look like? Number and type of audience reach on engagement and marketing, and the number of informational programs undertaken, audience and reach. And those measurables were taken from the deliverables. So those are just the highlights of the agreement. Looking for any additions, anything you want to take out. Does it capture what you're looking for when you said you wanted to bring this back?
Okay. So can you go back to the slide just before this one? And from Amy and Dan, when you look at the measurables specified, and just looking at everything that you have presented, and this is a marketing organization, so what are your thoughts?
Go ahead, you take your master.
Yeah.
Thank you. Council members, Madam Mayor, I think the measurables are obtainable. I would, when I, as the sole full-time staff person, look at actively participate, what does that mean? Does that mean my presence at the event or participate in marketing? And again, it's just, it's not that I'm not willing to attend events, but as the driver of the ship, if you will, my time, where is my time best spent? Under the new expectations of the agreement, and, what role do you want us to play in that?
And I think that's valid when you say actively participate. What does that mean? So that we all know what the definition is.
And it may be that we'll have to do some of that active participation using volunteer board members and not our paid staff. And we'll
Yep.
take the draft to our board next week at the retreat and talk more about this. We need to be realistic so the things that we do
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And that we don't anticipate that our staff is working a lot of overtime that we can't necessarily compensate them for.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Keeley.
That's one of those points that
Yeah.
if Amy had a complete staff,
Yeah.
it'd be a no-brainer, but it's a real difficult ask. And so I think what I hear her saying is, what's the literal interpretation of that?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to set her up to fail.
Yeah.
To have a measurable that she can't achieve right now. So maybe that could be worded differently.
Yeah.
So
I
it
agree.
is staff and/or a volunteer board member wherever possible for now, right? Until
Yeah.
we're back to better times and better, more staff coming
Or
back so she can actually
actively
be there.
participating means that you collaborate and look at what all of this means for a particular event and partner with the different activities.
Yeah, I
Is
think-
that, and
Yeah.
then when the launch hits, is it the members of the board and, our staff asks us to participate in some of our activities.
I think-
Some show up, some don't.
Yeah, I think Amy's comment earlier about you want us to publish it and market it, that's, I'm all in, that's what we do, right? So giving her creative and having her publish it is one thing. Physically being involved at the table in every single organization and every single event may be kind of getting to what she's saying. It's like, I don't know that right now, with me being the only full-time, I can commit to that. It might be a challenge.
Yeah.
We'll look at the exact language, and it may need, for the next 2 years, to have some language like to the extent possible.
Yeah. Melanie?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Council, I'm gonna throw an option out because it seems like there's still some opportunity to refine the agreement, and it sounds like the board hasn't looked at it yet, so perhaps Amy and Mr. McElroy can take the discussion back to the board at their meeting next week. We have some work to do, it appears.
Okay.
So why don't we allow the board to weigh in on their options, and then from a staff perspective, we'll come back to the council with some edits, some updates, and go from
That's-
there. Unless there's any other specific guidance or direction the council would like to provide tonight.
Yeah, and that's a great idea. So I have Councilmember Workman, and then Gustafson, then Schultz.
Thank you. I think we're all looking at the same item, letter I in the agreement. It says participate and actively partner in activities that promote the city, which I think is a little different than partner and actively participate in activities. So as I read that, participate and actively partner in activities that promote the city, I'm understanding that to read kind of what we just got done talking about is actively partnering with the chamber and fire muster and all these other city kind of one-off groups that's how I'm interpreting that, and I think we've already kind of validated that that's part of the basis of what you're currently doing. But I agree with our city manager that this probably does need to go to the board so that you guys can dissect this and see, as a whole, where this does or doesn't make sense.
Councilmember Gustafson?
I agree. I think it needs to go back to the board so we can all discuss it at our meeting. I will say, though, as someone who creates events, as Dan does, as pretty much everybody else, there are tons of volunteers in the city that just love to engage and get involved with all kinds of different organizations. And so I think there's a way to cultivate some people that normally may not interact with the CVB that might want to because you're part of different events around town and they can just be there to help promote their city and help promote those events. But that's more discussion we can have next week at the all-day.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
So I see a difference between actively participate and partner and the word attendance. What I'm looking for from you is that you know what's going on, not just that it's a date, but you have some level of information about what the event is, if there are any changes, if it's a new event, because you cannot market something unless you know what the hook is gonna be, right? And so when I'm looking at that, that's what I'm looking for, that you understand what the hook is on that event. And that you can then promote that event in a way that people, when they attend the event, they're like, yes, that is what it is. But also so that it piques their interest. So that's what I'm looking for in actively participate and partner with city activities. That may at times mean you're physically at the event itself. It may not. If it is a recurring event, it may be that you or you have someone else get the promotional materials that you will need to then promote it again next year. And yes, the city does that as well. But sometimes cities are, even when we're looking at something for marketing, we're looking at it slightly different than perhaps you are. Because you are looking for people to come and not just come for the day and bug out. You're looking for them to stay. So you're looking to position some of these events slightly differently than our city is. So that's what I'm looking at, and that's what my expectation is for this, to actively participate and partner with city activities. Just that we have a closer relationship where we are communicating effectively with one another. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Well, I think, Melanie, you have a great idea. Amy and her board will have discussion and go through the agreement and continue to work with staff before it comes back to us.
Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Mayor.
Pardon me?
I said, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. McElroy, thank you. Okay, so we, is everybody okay with the direction that we're taking right now? And I want to say thank you for your report, Amy and Dan, on the marketing efforts that you've taken through this COVID time that we're in. And you've done quite a bit. And I know that I have received some comments from what you did for Buck 54 because of the traffic that you've driven to also to their dining and opening, grand opening and so forth. So that was well done. I mean, it drove traffic to that. And Councilmember Keeley posted his dinners from Buck
Yeah, it was great.
54.
Friday night fish fry, Saturday night
Prime
prime rib.
rib.
Both specials were absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, Councilmember
I
Gustafson.
just want to add on, having done the relief sessions this year, and CVB was a big part of it. And it went off the charts as far as people, the hits that
Yeah.
were, that was amazing.
Yeah.
What was going on out there.
Because not only were you posting it,
CVB had it
Amy
all-
was
they had it all
posting
over
it,
the
and
place.
so when you
Yeah.
And
continue to share
they
from
got hits like
both,
crazy.
yeah. And so that was good.
It's in our background.
Yeah, we had a great campaign
Yeah, that was.
around,
Yeah.
we had a great campaign around the relief
Yeah.
sessions.
So I think that the partnership is a great one, and you're marketing the city, you're marketing the destination per state statute. But at the same time, during COVID, you have pivoted, as you've said in your report, and did some things that brought people within a 10-mile radius to understand what's open in Burnsville, what they can do, and so forth. And so that was nice. You had some creative things to help them get into restaurants. And so, thank you for that.
Thank
It's a
you.
lot of work for 1.5 people to be doing. And I think you accomplished a great deal. You had your, did you hire the drone that flew around at one of the relief sessions?
That was not us.
That was
no.
not you?
That was
But-
someone sitting in his pickup truck taking pictures.
Yeah, but the other
sister
thing is
did
that
that.
you had a photographer taking some photos, did you?
Madam Mayor, not at the relief sessions. We were at fire muster
Oh, that's right,
in
Yeah.
2018, I believe
Yeah.
it was.
yeah.
We had 2 professional photographers
Okay.
at
Yeah.
this relief
Yeah.
sessions this year.
Well, that comes back to the collaboration and partnership, right?
Yeah.
So the more information that we're given on the front end about events and occurrences in the
Yeah.
city, the better we're able to finesse that messaging
Yeah.
and market it as a destination driver.
And I got a ton of pictures for you for next year.
Perfect.
But
I'll
the-
look forward to getting those. I'll email you.
Oh, you got it.
The nice thing in your report was also the blogs that you're doing. I hope we can save T&J.
Yes, that is our goal.
Everyone eats sushi.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, I am doing my part. I'm like there like twice a week, so.
yeah.
Yeah, we have
Me
some
too.
amazing
I think
photography.
we're
Yeah.
all trying.
Yep.
Yeah, so thank you because you did a nice job with Buck 54, Olivia, and in taking pictures and also T&J. So,
And
nice
if I could,
work.
I just want to thank city staff, Jenny, Melanie, our board members, Dan Gustafson, and the folks that are here tonight, and the ones that are, I'm sure, watching from home.
Yeah.
Just thank you that we are able to do what we can do as staff with the support of everyone.
Yeah, so thank you for all that you've done. The COVID environment. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a recess, a 7-minute recess. 7-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene. So 8:07, we're back. And the next item is the Twin Lakes drainage improvement. And our city engineer, Jen Desrude, is going to tee this one up, and we have a consultant that's going to be presenting. Jen?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight, we're just going to do a brief overview of the Twin Lakes drainage improvements. I think many, if not all of you, have been contacted by residents in the past about certain drainage issues, high water levels on both Crystal Lake and South Twin Lake. And so we wanted to, we did some studies, I'll get to that, and want to make some improvements on both of those lakes. Additionally, with the Twin Lakes residential projects that have been coming through, the council had been contacted about stormwater management concerns with those. So this will address that as well. This timeline just shows that we started studying an overall citywide drainage issues back in 2019. We just wrapped up the study. It had 3 components. One was updating our overall citywide model, resiliency study to find problem areas and come up with potential solutions, and then the lake levels on the chain of lakes from Keller Lake to the Minnesota River. And the outcome of that study is our first project, which is this Twin Lakes drainage improvement. And so we are in the preliminary design phase right now, and Justin will go through our preliminary design. I suppose that arrow tells us where we're at right now. And then we're taking feedback from the residents, and hopefully if you have any feedback for these projects, we'll get them and incorporate them into our design and moving forward. So we have a project website where we'll be putting project updates, an online comment form. We've held 2 open houses, one virtually last Monday night. We had about 15 attendance to that. We held an in-person open house last Wednesday. We had, I think, about 15 households. Some people didn't sign in separately, but as a family. And so we were able to respond to some of the questions about the project, and I'll turn it over to Justin. He can go through some of those details.
All right, thank you very much, Jen. So the 3 projects we identified through the study phase is one here, working ourselves from the upstream to downstream, is the Crystal Lake outlet modification. On South Twin Lake to the north, we're looking at installing a new outlet and a new storm sewer system from the pond or the lake itself. And the third one is a regional pond expansion. So as we look at these, we want to really identify the benefits, and I'll give you an overall understanding of the dynamics of the system. So Crystal Lake actually flows into South Twin to the north. Then from South Twin, just south of South Cross Drive, there's a storm sewer connection that goes into North Twin. Ultimately, North Twin then flows back into the storm sewer on South Cross and heads west across I-35W through the chain of lakes and ultimately to the Minnesota River Valley. So what I'm trying to get to these point is that any improvement on any of these lakes will benefit all 3 of them together, basically, because they all work in concert together. So if we can make improvements in one location, it'll also have that domino effect in other locations. And so the goal, what we're trying to provide, is the 2 main things that came out of the study, the public involvement, and was, one specifically for Crystal Lake is there's the extended period of high water level condition. So we want the drawdown, right? So how long does it take the lake to drain down? We want to get that done quicker, because what it does if it's at elevated high water levels, restricts the use, just basic fundamentals. The second part of it is causes erosion. As the water level's higher on the lake, it actually helps to erode the lake shore, and I know that has been a known problem by residents and one of the concerns that we heard. As we move north into South Twin, high water levels have been a concern. Also similar to Crystal Lake, how long those high water levels are there. So consistent across the board is, can we reduce high water levels to the system, but also can we reduce the drawdown, which these projects that we're proposing all do both of those combined factors. So as I dig into a little bit more detail of each one of these and trying to keep it high level here is, so we're looking at the Crystal Lake improvements. As I mentioned before, we're looking at replacing that box outlet structure, if you guys have seen it along the shoreline there. We're looking at just replacing that, increasing and making some modifications. The modifications, you look at this, the graph on the bottom, and what does that mean and how much reduction? We're saying a 30% reduction in time it takes for the lake to reestablish the normal pool elevation. But what that means is it's not just hours, we're talking days of improvement, where it might have taken a couple weeks and residents are like, hey, they're getting phone calls, why is this water so high? We're actually going to reduce that, 6 to 7 days a week, comparatively speaking, of how long it would typically draw down. And one of the other residential concerns we heard was, how are you guys gonna build this? When is it gonna be built? And the part of that is the parking lot, right? People want to use the parking lot, the boat landing. We don't have a lot of space down there. There's the street in proximity, so we're looking at proposing to improve this area in the fall when there's limited activity. The recreational use of the lake is overall limited compared to the summer months. So we're targeting fall of '21 to do the construction for Crystal Lake.
Are we going to be notifying all of those residents around there with all of this? Because we had some complaints about all of the traffic and the cars parking around that area this summer?
Yeah, prior to doing any construction, we'll be sending out notifications of when construction's gonna start.
Yeah, because you didn't like all of the complaints, and I got a whole bunch of them also. So, yeah, we need to be open, transparent. We need to let people know what's going to be happening over there.
Madam Mayor, is that?
Yes.
Looking at
Councilmember
that,
Keeley.
the red box extends into the parking lot area and takes up, it looks like parking space, correct?
Correct. That's just temporary, like parking for vehicles, equipment temporarily. So they can have a spot, vehicles of equipment, of tools and things like that they can shuttle back and forth to the work zone and back. So no actual improvements will happen in the parking lot. Just think of it as a staging area.
Yeah, which is I'm just going to point out, you're going to start when?
It wouldn't be till after Labor Day.
Okay.
So that's what we want to avoid
Lower
the summer
demand on
months
it.
and the really busy time and look at, like a late September, October timeframe.
Are you going to be having meetings with the Crystal Lake Association?
So we've already reached out to everybody who lives along Crystal Lake, and some of them attended our meeting that we had already. But we'll keep that same group in our correspondence. And we've been directing everyone to the website, but we'll likely have another open house type meeting prior to construction.
Okay.
So as we continue down the chain of lakes, we get to South Twin Lake. Similar to what we just talked about at Crystal Lake, what we're proposing here is to install a new outlet. As I mentioned initially, the water from South Twin flows into North Twin, and then that water to leave the two chain of lakes there actually has to flow out of a pipe that's located at North Twin Lake. What we want to do to maximize the drawdown and maximize the discharge from the system is we're actually going to install a new outlet on South Twin that connects directly in with the downstream trunk storm sewer system. That way, it allows South Twin to drain faster, and that's where we're seeing, again, 35% change and reduction in drawdown time. We are seeing reduction in high water levels, but the problem with reducing the high water levels further is that you'd have to upsize the pipe further downstream, and it's a substantial improvement project to try to accommodate that. So we're maximizing what we can from a high water level reduction and really trying to get that drawdown to reduce as much as possible.
Okay. Before you go on, have we communicated with Mr. DeMasters and have him understand what's happening here?
Mayor and Council, Mr. DeMaster was both at both meetings, the virtual and the in-person. We spoke with him. He did have concerns that this wouldn't address the problem. We tried to explain to him what we're doing is lowering the drawdown quicker. The high water level will reduce slightly, but it will still have that bounce up. We explained all of that to him in both meetings.
Will he be experience flooding like he's been getting?
He will still experience high water levels, but the water won't stay there as long. It will draw down much, much faster. There's not much that we can do besides chase this problem with a larger pipe, about a mile of new pipe at a much larger size, which is not a feasible or cost-effective solution, which is one of the goals that Justin was given with his project. But it will bring the water down faster. I think, how many days faster on South Twin?
Yeah, this one is again in about the week to 8 days timeframe, relatively speaking, in the weeks. And the one thing too to touch on is we've been experiencing a lot of frequent storm events. So because the system takes so long to draw down and there's so many lakes in the sequence of it, if we're able to get that water out there faster, that means Crystal Lake has more storage to hold back water. Same with South Twin and North Twin, all have capacity to hold water, versus when it takes it 21 days for them to draw down, that means they're already starting with a water level that might be 3 or 4 feet in the lake. So if we can get that water out of the system and reestablish the normal, that means there's just more volume to handle those events that we've been experiencing this last summer, the year before, and ultimately, provide additional benefit that isn't necessarily shown in a model when we look at traditional storm events.
Okay, but he was there. You did reach out.
I reached out and he was at both meetings.
Okay, good. But he wasn't quite happy with the information.
He was not sure of it. He didn't know that he believed that it would solve the problem, and I was clear that it will not. The waters will still rise almost to the level they are today, but it won't just hang out there for days. It's gonna recede probably quicker than he's ever thought, and if a storm comes through at night, it might even start receding before he even notices. Some of that stuff is, his concerns with killing plants and things like
Yeah,
that. Water that
Because
just
it damaged
sits,
his property.
water that just sits there is what did that, and so this will help with that.
Okay.
And just, if I may, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor, ask to clarify, you mentioned improve it by 6 days, from 21 to,
yeah.
say, 15 instead of 21 days, it'll.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Think of it like roughly a 30% reduction in time.
So cut a week off of the high water
Yeah,
duration, right?
Correct.
Okay.
yeah, and the flooding where it just keeps flooding his property and ruining
Yep.
his, yeah.
So as we look to the third improvement then, which is located just on the north side of North Twin Lake, the regional pond that's located here is actually taking in water from the north, from the different developments, the residential areas. There's large diameter storm sewer systems that discharge into this, provide water quality benefits and also flood control. And so what we're proposing to do here to help, again, reduce, flood levels, but also improve volume, is we're looking at expanding the regional pond. So what I mean by that is we're, removing dirt along the hillside, and so how much water can fill that regional basin, we're looking at providing more live storage, we call it. So more volume period that you can fill that area without sending that water downstream within North Twin or South Twin. So it helps hold water back, create more storage for it. With this, we did have residents, we actually met in site with a local resident adjacent to the project. Initially in this graph, in the concept, we want to solicit input, right? And so we show just a larger area being impacted from a tree standpoint. Through conversations with him and working with Jen and her staff, right now we're looking at providing a buffer, undisturbed buffer between the residential properties located on the east side and our work zone, just to maintain the feel that they had as much as we can, while also providing the benefit of providing that reduction in the additional volume that we need within the regional pond to help create more volume within the overall system. So those are the couple things that we got from that. The other part of it we're looking at doing, and is still in the concept phase, is can we provide additional water quality, right? So if we provide an additional water quality benefit within this pond, that means North Twin and South Twin also have additional water quality benefit, because that water ultimately does reach both of them as well. And the water quality benefit would be provided by increasing the amount of permanent pool that's there, how much water stays there long-term. The more volume you can provide, that means the more area, or the more resuspension of sediment would not occur, and you can hold more material in there over a longer period of time. So as we look at, those are the three improvements, and as Jen mentioned before, all of these improvements are focusing on reducing the drawdown period and reducing high water levels, and it reduces the high water levels throughout the system entirely. Within the area that we're looking, there's no increases, and it also reduces that drawdown period, so we can eliminate those nuisance back-to-back conditions that create artificially high water levels. As we look to then expanding in the schedule, as Jen had noted, we're in that preliminary engineering phase right now. We're looking to, move into a final design phase, putting the details in and working with city staff through this fall and winter. In the winter of 2021, we look at bidding the project out to a contractor, starting construction in the spring through the fall. Again, on the construction side, we'd be holding off Crystal Lake and only requiring the contractor to start that project when we want them to, which would be at the earliest, after Labor Day into September, but allowing the regional basin and the South Cross Drive storm sewer system to be installed, in the spring, summer months. Ultimately speaking, with FEMA, they are FEMA designated floodplains, and we look at remapping just based on the improvements. We want to make sure that everything matches up within the city ordinances to what the maps are showing in FEMA. So we do a remapping post-construction project to get that all equalized out. With that, we'd love to take any questions you guys have.
Any questions for
Oh,
Justin and Jen?
Just, it's a big help.
Yeah.
Obviously, to the lake owners on Crystal Lake during heavy rainfall when they have a no wake
And
for
then
extended period of
downstream.
times. The downstream, same thing. I mean, one's more recreational than the other, but the flooding that some of the
Yeah.
folks experience there, seeing that water recede quicker is going to be a positive sign.
Yep, it is. We'll wait and see next year after, or it wouldn't be 21, it'll be 22. Hopefully, we don't have the kind of rain events that we've experienced that have flooded and kept that water high for 21 days. And really was devastating for some of our residents because of the impact on their property.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. It's good. I'm glad. We're doing some things to help move that water faster out of there and be good for the lake owners and, the lakes and the property owners around the lake. So after that, you'll do the Lomar?
Correct.
So did we have to do that with like Twin Lakes and with some of the flooding? Because it's,
There's already been a mapping effort for Twin Lakes, and this is just gonna redo that
Okay.
based on the new modeling and the project that we're doing.
okay. All right, anything else?
I think so.
Okay,
good.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Nicely
much.
done. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the proactive property maintenance measurables. And Jenny, Ms. Faulkner, our Community Development Director, and who else is going to be? I see that you have Jason Arsvold.
I think there's a technical error in the background because he is not here.
And I was thinking, okay, I don't see Jason from Ellers. I'm not quite. But I do see Chris.
Chris Forsland's our, my co-presenter tonight on this one.
Okay.
So, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We're gonna go back and forth here, but will start with the history and kind of why we're here. This is a follow-up to the November 26th, 2019 work session where we halted the proactive property maintenance program. As part of that discussion, you had wanted some kind of information to be brought back for monitoring purposes, and we're struggling with what that could be if we're not doing it. So we're seeking clarity on what that information is, and we'll start with letting you know what information we do have that we could bring back to you. I'll just do next slide.
Next
That.
Madam Mayor, council members, first thing I want to talk about is a little bit of the types of data that we have available right now. We can take a look at, we can, I guess, determine what our quantitative data is. Quantitative data kind of tells us how much. It's what we would traditionally use when we want to know where we're at on certain things. Examples would be the number of complaints, number and type of violations, where those complaints may have originated, whether it be staff-generated or public-generated, unfounded complaints, as well as the number of complaints at a certain location. So there's a lot of numerical parameters that can be assigned to that. We can take a look at qualitative data. Qualitative data is more of where it's going, we can look at outcomes of any actions that we take in for enforcement steps, whether it be a first violation, whether it be just an informational letter, things along that line, as well as perhaps take a look at risk assessments. Where are we moving? Are we seeing more of a particular type of violation so we can divert our resources that way? Right now, we can do that. It's somewhat difficult with the current software program we have. What we can't do is we don't collect data on perhaps phone calls, content, anything like that. Emails, we may attach emails as a part of that, but we don't track them. We can't parse it out very easily. Time spent on any particular case from end to end, as well as the severity of the cases. there's some, as far as problems with the data, it's just a point in time. And it can be affected by a couple different things. Changes in any code processes, which we've had plenty of. Seasonality, the last 2 years, I've actually received a complaint for long weeds and grass in the middle of December, which I thought was interesting. But that's an example of where that can fluctuate. Staffing levels, and also, again, limitations on our software and our data sets. The software that we're currently running right now, the statistical portions of it are about 10 years old. So very difficult for us to do, very, very labor intensive, and like anything, is very dependent on how it's inserted, what data is put in, and what we parse out of it. So it's tough to use.
We have maybe some other considerations when we think about what we could bring back, and we can analyze the data we have, and just throwing this out there that perhaps you want to create parameters for success. You know, are there certain benchmarks that you would want to put in place kind of as measurables? Compliance rates, our response rates, the engagement on our request tracker, how we're following up on those. Do we want to do an analysis on the top 10 complaints and evaluate if changes are needed? To those that are complaining, educating the public, look at our top 10 violations. Do we need to make changes there, changes to the ordinance perhaps, changes to process? So there's certain other kinds of benchmarks on how we use the data that could measure kind of the overall outcomes of the program. When we look at 2021 and trying to provide you something, it's going to be a challenge for us. So we've had a lot of changes this last year, as you know. And so we've spent a lot of our time on educating residents of those changes because things are different, right? And so we're not doing proactive. We have increased the process by sending education letters. And I'm not saying this is bad, but these are the changes. And so we get calls, why are things taking longer? Well, we've added another step in our process, and so it takes a couple more weeks to get compliance. Significant change on the trash can screening. We get calls, I think we still get calls on this, and having to explain it's fine where it's at, or we'll go take a look and it's not a violation. So a lot of public education on that. And then, of course, with COVID, that has changed kind of our code enforcement and what we've done there. We've been down one staff person this entire year. So. Again, not knowing what the financials would be for the city. Next year, some things that we have in the pipeline, we're looking at new community development software suite. So we expect this to help in a lot of ways across community development and licensing and with our reporting. We're also looking at next year service delivery changes, kind of improving what we do, how we work with our residents. Through our economic development strategic plan, we're looking at housing initiatives and how we can be partners with our residents on improvements, kinds of things. So just a different way of thinking about how we work with the residents. That takes time, may take some money, but it's something we're looking forward to getting into next year. And so with that, we're looking for direction from you on what, if anything, we've made these changes. A couple of you said, but we want to bring it back. We want to know how is it going. And we're not quite sure how to quantify that for you if we're not doing it. So if you say you're fine, we can talk about this in 3 years. If you say, this is Jenny, this is what I want you to bring back, then we can talk about that too. So we don't have to do anything here is what I'm saying.
So Jenny, one of the things is that it's not fine because I look at the number of complaints that I've received this year. I mean, I think we need to take a look at that. And when you have neighbors write and are frustrated because their neighbor isn't maintaining their property, and it now has an effect on their property, and they're concerned. It's hard when people are frustrated, and I know that we don't have a proactive measure in place, but you know, I respond to these folks. You all see my response because I copy you all. But when they come back and then another neighbor would write, and but they don't want to be, don't want to cause a conflict, but they know it has, you know, and they say things like, she's a lovely person, but, and it goes on, and that's just one. I mean, I have all of them. And when people say, you know, perhaps I need to move out of Burnsville. Perhaps, you know, it's, I want to get the value for my home now before the neighborhood deteriorates and the appraised value for my home is going to go down. That's a hard one for me to read or listen to. So, and I know these are all property maintenance, and, you know, it's hard when a man who is struggling with cancer and doesn't get any response, because it has to do when he tries to help his neighbor or talk to his neighbor, but he's a renter. The neighbor is a renter, and so the owner isn't taking care of things. And then our process is so protracted, and it causes him frustration. So, and you all know this because you see my response, and I always feel so bad. I don't know, you know, and he's in his 80s. So I think we need to take a look at this and say, what are those measures, and what do we do to keep our neighborhoods vibrant? You know, our vision is that Burnsville is a vibrant city, but we also need to put attention to the vibrancy of our neighborhoods and make sure that it continues to improve in terms of its value, because it's, for most people, their homes are the largest asset in their portfolio. And when they see that it's devaluing, they get scared, and especially when they're seniors. And then I hear things like, well, maybe I should move out of Burnsville. I don't like that. Councilmember Schultz.
So seeing what you have in your report, I agree, you definitely have challenges on what to report back to us, absolutely. And I think coming on top of what we're going to be doing is doing that major ordinance overhaul. And so we're going to be having some changes there. Coming on top of that, we're looking at things through a more inclusive and culturally diverse lens on the reason why we have some of our ordinances, and if that's something that still fits our community. And so we're going to be looking at this, not just the overhaul, but we're going to be looking at it with a different lens, and also in how we communicate with our community as well. That's going to be affecting that. You're listing that you have the new software, which is coming up, which is good, and yeah, it's probably way overdue, so that's good. And you're trying out your new service delivery processes, which I think is excellent, because we always want to take a more educational approach. And I really appreciate how hard you guys are working to do that. You know, we asked you to do it, and I think you were inclined to be that way anyway, naturally. So this is a good fit. So I think with all of that coming together, I think we should put this on pause for a report at least for a year, because we've got a lot going on. You've got a lot going on, and we're going to be having a lot more significant changes. So having you try to report on something you're having difficulty reporting because your software doesn't allow you to, you don't track the data, and we're going through all of these changes, you know, plus, I mean, let's face it, 2020 has just been the year of taking a mulligan. I think we should, you know, we should pause for at least a year. Let's get some of all of these changes, some of them at least in place and some of them going forward, before we try to make an assessment, because otherwise we're trying to make an assessment during kind of a really multi-pronged, chaotic time. So that would be my suggestion, and, you know, I was one of them that asked for you guys to report back, and so I have to apologize to you for that, because seeing your presentation now, I see the difficulties in what we were asking you to do, so, my preference would be, let's just pause this for a year and shake things out a little bit.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of bad timing on this. But I do have a couple of questions that hopefully you can answer. Are we ever to monitor whether the complaints are up compared to before we were proactive?
Yes, we have a few backup slides in case you ask some questions.
Oh, you gotta.
So, trying to stay on topic of the data, but.
And I have a second one too, as long as you
Yeah.
have this slide up. The other one are our violations we're issuing, or citations issuing. Are they up and down since we made this change?
Well,
They're down across the board on
How about-
everything.
how about complaints?
Complaints,
We can't.
you know, I would love to say yes or no. That's our summary as of today.
Okay. I'm just thinking, because we were a proactive community, we probably didn't get a lot of complaints because we were actually out there every day just pounding on it.
Yeah.
So I would have expected the complaints would have gone up just because we weren't being proactive.
The
That's
problem
actually really
with
good.
that, I believe, is that, you know, COVID had a huge impact.
Yeah.
People didn't even know if we were in the office, and we were unable to even
Well, you
respond
weren't.
for 3 months.
Yeah, so
So-
there are many factors
Yeah,
that
lots of
drive the
factors.
numbers that you're seeing. So
Again, I was one that kind of wanted to stay with the pro, but a lot of that's part of my realtor hat too, because I look at neighborhoods and if I go to houses where one's in total disrepair and the other one's good, the one that's good isn't gonna make the money it should make because of what's in disrepair. But what I'm trying to figure out, if our citizen complaint thing is working for us or not.
Well,
I mean, you guys are out in the neighborhoods. I know you go on complaint, but you're not blind. You see what's going on when you're in the neighborhood. You see that there are 10 other houses in violation and you don't do anything about it. I don't know. But you see it because you're out there.
We all see it.
we all see.
Yeah, I see it. I see it when I'm
Yeah.
out there.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, as we're embarking on the discussion with housing with the Economic Development Commission, our next meeting will be talking about what tools we have and what tools are possible. And I will tell you that our team came up with some creative ideas. And it's our job to present kind of the information. You and the EDC can say, no, 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 no. But, you know, one of the things that came up from our staff was, you know, we haven't done a housing survey in a while. We used to do these on a
Yeah,
regular
we did.
basis where it was an intern, but at least that intern looked at every neighborhood in the
Yep.
city. So it was the same perspective with the same scoring sheet, not 10 different people's opinions. And so we were able to get a measurement over time of kind of the condition of certain neighborhoods. It was,
Yep.
there's a fine line there, right? Because this is where people live and they're proud of their neighborhoods, I'd like to think, and so in the data. But it was presented to council, if I'm recalling, in a high-level overview, so we maybe knew where to focus some of our efforts on. And then back in the late 90s, Madam Mayor will remember this, we got grants, Department of
Yep.
Justice grants, or they were called Weed and Seed
Weed
grants.
and Seed, and it was over by Neil and
Vistiview.
Vistiview to help make
Yeah.
improvements to those neighborhoods. And so, but that survey data was important
Yeah.
to be able to gauge kind of where we're at. We had interns do them, I think we did them every 5 or 8 years, and
Yeah.
we haven't had interns for a while, for various reasons, but that was one of the things that certainly came up, was that. The other thing that came up was that proactive code enforcement, we're not the only community to use it, and in other communities that have it, and one of the reasons why we started, it can be a good tool to maintain your housing stock.
I
And
think-
so, that was another thing we talked about, and when we look at what other communities do. So we look forward to this discussion with the EDC and having them come before you in December so we can talk about some of these things. Again, are excited for where this can lead us and the kind of government that we want to be and the services that we want to provide to our residents. You know, I heard the comment from our staff, and we do this, but we want to be more forthright in walking with people and helping them with their projects is what came out of our meeting this week, so. Very positive, and I want to share
I like the idea that you're
that
going
with you.
to do a housing stock review and also the neighborhoods like we've done in the past. Because that's how we got a lot of information that
Yes.
helped us to keep our neighborhoods vibrant and healthy. And our real estate community was very much a part of that. Because they're the ones who are out there, and they're the ones who also gave us feedback where I remember hearing from them saying, well, when people come in to Burnsville and they go into a certain neighborhood, the client would say, drive on, go someplace else. This is not, and I remember the neighborhood they were talking about, and I'm not going to say it tonight, but, you know, this is why we moved towards proactive also, was because our neighborhoods were beginning to look depressed and not well-kept.
So it's another tool, as you're saying,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, in the potential toolbox that we'll be bringing forward is the housing survey.
Yeah.
Did you say we'll be discussing this in December with the EDC?
December work session is what
Okay,
we have
all right.
planned for
Thank
right
you.
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because when this happened and we had people in the audience, we always come back after a year, and so I wanted to make sure we understand what was happening. So I'm happy to hear that you have some activities that we can review and take a look at, because we need to do something. So it's good. Thank you. So this did you need anything else?
Only if, not necessarily, only if you
Yeah.
wanted to tell us what you want, but
Yeah.
if you want to defer it for a year and get through kind
I
of the
think
housing
you're
stuff
you're
and the
on a
city
roll.
code, that's fine.
You're on a roll. Staff is doing some things. Let's keep moving if you've got the capacity to do it. And you already have scheduled this to be on our December work session, and you're going to be talking to the Economic Development Commission. So you're on a roll. Let's keep going.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, council. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good work. And now the next item is our legislative priorities, and Melanie?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Last agenda item of the evening, so, ooh, I'm going too fast here. So I will be efficient with the presentation. You have seen these items before. The goal of our legislative priorities is really to understand what is important to the council for us to advocate for in the upcoming legislative session, as well as during the off, part of the year when the legislature isn't meeting. It also helps provide guidance to staff on what our role is to be, and what resources we will invest in our advocacy. So during last year's discussion, we really refined our legislative priorities and established 3 primary positions. These are the ones that we're going to work most hard on. We're going to really pound the pavement on these. We're going to work with our legislative delegation. We're going to work with our lobbyists. We're going to be writing letters, helping draft legislation if necessary, testifying, being very active. And those 3 positions are the freeway landfill and dump remediation. So not only can it be a marketing tool for us, Councilmember Workman, but we also can hopefully get the site cleaned up. The council has advocated for protection of our water, our groundwater and Minnesota River, while also a viable, creative economic development opportunity as an outcome as well. Additionally, the city is advocating for non-bonding funds to be allocated for this remediation. The second item of priority is fire service districts. We all know that providing service, fire service is an expensive proposition. Current statute does not allow for collaboration for joint fire service districts. We would support special legislation to allow that. And then the final topic, final priority, is our Center Village TIF district, our Burnsville Center area. As we know, that is in need of redevelopment. We are wanting to get ahead of it and achieve special legislation because this doesn't meet the traditional TIF definition of blighted. However, we know it's functionally obsolete. So we're seeking to get ahead of that and be a leader and get some legislation that would allow for TIF to be a tool for this area. And then we developed supporting positions. Now these are important positions, but we would like maybe sign letters of support, assist in research, work with our partners at the league, Metro Cities, MLC on these positions. Generally, the overarching goal would be support for local control. That means land use, use of revenue, letting cities be able to determine what is the best use for the city of Burnsville, what are the needs of our community, and being able to make those decisions that fit our community's needs. Then we have 3 items that are very specific to Burnsville: the host community economic development grant program. That's a grant program that recognizes the economic impacts of being a host community for a landfill. Aggregate mining fee, again, would allow for a mutually agreeable upon local fee to be levied. And then primary service area, that is has to do with our ambulance service, and it's ensuring that we have the ability to provide guidance on who provides ambulance service in our community, as well as encouraging the state to take a look at some of the antiquated and out-of-date language regarding PSAs, primary service areas. So upcoming items, we asked for council feedback tonight. We do have a council work session in December where we have invited our lobbyists as well as our legislative delegation to join us, and we'll have a roundtable discussion on those items in anticipation of the legislative session convening early 2021. So with that, you have all seen the priorities. It has been in your packet. You've seen it. We have not made any changes from last year, so I'm looking for any guidance if there's any changes you'd like to see, or any priorities that are missing that we should be discussing. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions? Anybody? Yeah?
I think the
Doesn't
priorities
change
are
much
right.
from last year.
Priorities are good, and the thing is, 2021, January 5th. We don't know what's gonna happen, but, you know, we plan and
Amazing
move
date,
forward.
actually.
Yeah.
What?
So, Melanie, there's consensus that all is good, and so we'll look forward to meet our legislative delegation in December.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think,
I was off by an hour.
Michelle, you have
I was off by several.
an item for us to review, and that's to schedule a special meeting to canvass the general election results.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have 2 roundtable items this night about scheduling meetings. The first one is to canvass the general election results, and due to the change in how we're counting the absentee ballots this year, where because of COVID, it has been extended an extra week that we'll count in any extra ballots that come in postmarked by Election Day up to 7 days after.
Yeah.
We're asking that we extend that period. Normally, we would do it like 1 week after.
Yeah.
We're looking to push that to the 10 days after at at November 13th. That way, we will come after the county does their canvas.
Okay,
And I'm looking at the schedule, and I do see that there are some things on the schedule for Friday morning, but it looks like there's some availability for Friday afternoon, and I need at least three from the council to be present to canvas.
Is on the 13th you're talking about?
13th, we're looking like 1
Friday
to
the
2:30? Right.
What do we want to
13th.
validate on
You
that?
want us, you want to put us together on the 13th, really?
Took over election results.
so, what time did you have?
I'm looking, and it looks like the schedule is open after lunch.
How about for lunch?
Before
Okay.
lunch, we
No,
have
For lunch, like during the noon hour, can we do it like 12 to 1 or
Oh,
something?
at
I don't-
noon?
Yeah, because the campus doesn't take that
It's a
long.
very efficient meeting,
That's
Madam
true.
Mayor
I
and
know it,
Council.
so I think I have a GWDB Executive Committee meeting from 11:30 to 12:30. Can we do it,
Did you say that morning wasn't available, like 8 AM or 7:30 AM? Is that
or 10:30, or
So,
booked first thing?
what do you have?
I think that my calendar must be still updating because the GWDB just popped up on it. I'm sorry, my calendar must be still updating here for you. Do we not have a?
Because I can
Is
do it
that
at
the
1 o'clock.
CEO?
Can you do it at 1 o'clock?
Jenny,
Take a
is the
late
CEO
lunch?
forum on that day?
Not until 9 o'clock.
From 9
I
to
can.
11?
Yep.
And then, okay, and then for some reason that just disappeared off of her calendar that I'm looking at. And then, okay, so then we've got 11:30 to 12, so anything, after lunch.
First thing in the morning is not good.
Can we
for-
still bring lunch?
Well, it's very hard for him because he's helping with getting the kids.
Yeah, so early morning's
So
not that
after
great.
lunch is what Vince is
Better.
saying, 1 o'clock?
Yeah,
Yeah,
1
one's
o'clock.
fine.
1 o'clock?
Perfect.
we can do a late lunch.
1 works.
Okay, and then, the second item I have is that, every 3 years, we have, to make reappointments for our,
Black Dog.
appointments and reappointments for our Black Dog Watershed Management Commission, and this is our 3rd year. Their current appointments will, expire at the end of November, and so we're looking to get, sometime in November. The current commissioners will serve until the next appointments are made, but I'm looking at appointments for the first meeting in December. And so we're looking to set potential interview time. In the past, we have had never more than 5 apply or reapply for this commission, or 6. So that it's usually, and then with the incumbents that may be reapplying,
Well,
you may
there's
only
one
need to
incumbent that
interview a
has
couple.
told me he's not
So-
going to. One
I think
incumbent.
there's one that is not
Yeah.
reapplying that I know of, but I haven't talked to all of them yet. But I don't expect there to be more than 4, probably 4 or 5 interviews, so it would be an hour or less, potentially it could be 30 minutes.
Yep.
I think what I had on here was, as a potential date, was Monday the 20th, so Monday before Thanksgiving, maybe somewhere around 5 p.m.
The 23rd?
Works?
I can do
Does
that.
that work for everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
I applied for that commission once,
I remember.
and everybody laughed at me.
Okay.
Hang on.
Okay, you got what you needed, Michelle?
I've got the special meetings that I need, and report on our advisory boards is all we have left, Madam Mayor.
Okay,
What was that
Yeah.
date? I haven't,
23rd, the
That's the
23rd.
23rd at 5 p.m.
okay.
11/23 or
11/23.
October 23?
11.
Okay.
I have a question.
Dan G?
Michelle, can you explain to us what election day is going to look like? As far as, once the polls, what are we going to see when the polls close out of Burnsville?
Okay. So, Election Day, of course, is still, any election day during a pandemic is somewhat of a mystery. But what I can tell you for what we are expecting right now is that we are, of course, experiencing
Hi.
incredulous numbers for absentee voting, which during a pandemic, we did expect. We're going to be on Election Day with the numbers of how many will be going to the polls on Election Day and coming in person. I think that we're gonna see a lot more absentee and early voting ballots than we've ever seen. But I think the big issue is people are wondering what's going to be happening with the results on election night, right?
Correct.
And so, my intention, as of right now, this is the plan is that we will have every ballot that is voted on election day and every ballot that's received for absentee by election day counted on election night. Now, that's typically what we have always done. That is our plan to make sure that that happens again this election. Now, we are gonna have that 7 days after where we're gonna be collecting, having those ballots come in that maybe didn't make it through the mail fast enough or something like that. We hope that that's not going to be a significant number. Shouldn't change any races unless they're very close. So I think that we'll have a good understanding of where we sit by election night.
Right.
Does that help?
Yes, it does, thank you. I think it helps for our citizens out here to hear that.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Councilmember Keeley, you have a report? Anything to talk about?
Yeah, something that you're working on too. Tomorrow, this is MVTA related. Our red line service, which is subcontracted from the Met Council, has been in place for, 8 years? We were notified over the summer that the Met Council wasn't gonna put it out for contract and they were gonna take over the route. It's a Lakeville to Mall of America run. More of a local service in the heart of MVTA's service area. And so it's a BRT route, that's where the funding came from. And when the county transit tax was dismantled, the Met Council took over 100% funding of it. And so we've been working with them quite extensively to try and bring that or keep that contract and retain that service by MBTA. We have the infrastructure, the buses, the garage, the drivers, the maintenance, everything. So it's a big deal for MBTA to not have that route. And so we've been working with Chair Zelli, and we talked about this a little bit on our I-35 Solutions Zoom call, where Chair Zelli presented. And I spoke about this issue and asked that he make sure that his staff responds to our MVTA and STA staff reaching out to have a meeting. And our chair and our executive director will be meeting with Mr. Zelli tomorrow about this. I'm hopeful, but we don't know. That council's been basically driving this to essentially just take it over and basically tell us, we're not gonna renew your contract, we're not gonna go out for bid, we're just gonna take it over. And it's been not the most ideal communication and partnership situation. So.
What did Chair Zelli say to that?
He acknowledged his history with MBTA with his Jefferson lines, and many years ago came to MBTA.
I was on a board when we formed that partnership.
Yep, so he didn't really expound on his feelings or his thoughts, just that he's open to having a conversation and acknowledged his history with MBTA and wanted to have the conversation. It's part driven by efficiency, cost efficiency. Right now, MBTA has significantly reduced service. We have some people on furlough. Met Transit has a lot of people on furlough and reduced service, and so this would allow them to put some of their folks back to work. It would cause some folks in MBTA to be cut loose. So it's a very tenuous situation. And it really gets back to the model, which, and this is my reference to Madam Mayor being involved in this, is she sits on the Governor's Blue Ribbon Commission, and one of their goals and tasks at hand is to discuss transit in the region.
Efficiencies.
And efficiencies and how it's delivered, and that brings up questions that date back to the 80s when the legislature in Minnesota gave authority for cities and/or joint powers agreements to form and provide their own bus service funded through various sources, but controlled by the Met Council. And it's been a challenge, especially in the last 10 years, I would say. There's been a lot of tug of war over territory, and where certain BRT lines come through a given opt-outs territory, like MBTA. Many years ago, you'll remember there was a bus line that opened up at Kendrick in Lakeville. There was some very questionable things going on with that bidding process, which Lakeville chose the lowest price of bid, which was Met Transit, which is actually
So
MBTA's
Frog League.
financing source.
Yeah, Frog League.
And so we, that was really a bad way of conducting business, to bid well under cost just to make sure that you get it, so you cut right through the
Yep.
middle of MBTA's
Yep.
territory. So that was maybe the first,
That was a pain.
shot across
That was
the
a lot
bow
of
that
pain.
was, yeah, and it was an underhanded way to take a route and actually stick it in the face of an opt-out and run a route right through you.
Lakeville lost in that thing too,
Yeah,
because without MBTA, there was no service from Lakeville into Burnsville. They had to go right through us because they weren't allowed to stop here.
yeah. So, that route was the beginning of it, and then, of course, there's been challenges with funding. And the model is, my complaint has always been, the model is really poor when opt-outs rely on funding from their main competitor. Met Council oversees Metro Transit, that's our competitor, and so it's really bad. Fortunately, the Blue Ribbon Commission is having this discussion. Your most recent meeting, I saw the notes and
Yeah.
all the dialogue, and you addressed a lot of this, the governance of how transportation is provided, funded, et cetera, delivered. And you were taking up the 2011 Legislative Auditor's Report on this subject, and there was a lot of things in there, and comparing to metro planning organizations and transit around the country. We have a very unusual, unique, and poor model in this region. Pretty much nobody else does it as bad as we do as far as how the governance model is structured and how transit is funded. There is just a lot of things about our model that need to be overhauled, and I'm hoping that I'm hopeful that the Blue Ribbon Commission can provide some clarity and maybe a new model. That gets to even the governance model of the Met Council and elected versus appointed and staggered terms, and a lot of discussion on that at various levels. So hopefully, I'll hand it to Governor Walz to pull this Blue Ribbon Commission together, and it's chaired by a former representative and
Mary Liz Holberg.
Dakota County Commissioner Mary Liz Holberg, who's been a transportation guru for decades. So a lot of a good cross mix of ideological values at the table. So a lot of great discussion, and glad to follow that. So anyway, it's tomorrow's a big day, big meeting with Mr. Zelli on behalf of the MBTA. We've been advocating, a lot of us have had a lot of back channel communications trying to work this forward and get his ear and get a fair look at the whole situation. There's a lot more and that's gone on since 2017 related to that, and it has to do with cap funding and, quite frankly, no negotiation on Met Council's part, just kicking the football down the road, weren't responding to MBTA's requests, and more of the same bad model, put it that way. So hopefully something good comes out of that. I-35, as I mentioned, we did have.
What is
Mr. Zelli.
MBTA's position on what an excellent model would look like? Or perhaps you want to tell me that offline?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that I would be able to answer that question fully anyway right now, because that gets into the bigger funding model. We're just battling right now to hang on to the red line service, and we believe, I mean, there's a question whether that line is truly under the statute definition of a BRT, because it only goes from Lakeville to the Mall of America. It's really a local regional service, station-to-station service. It doesn't go into downtown. Connects to other buses that do. So there's a lot to discuss about the red line. But Chair Zally did present at I-35. It was a really good presentation. He gave us a global perspective of transit and what's been going on with Met Council and the funding and, of course, all the COVID impacts. And so, Charlie, Mr. Zally comes from the private sector, Jefferson Bus Lines. I'm really happy that he's in that position.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be one of the most fair and balanced and equitable-minded people running the Met Council. So I was very impressed with that pick. And so he'll be put to the test tomorrow at the meeting, and so we'll see what comes out of it. That's it. That's really the majority of what's going on is with I-35 and MBTA.
Okay. Dan G?
I hate to ask you this question, Dan, but I'm going to. Do you feel like our rapid transit here in Burnsville is in jeopardy as far as our express buses go?
There is certainly an underlying current of desire for consolidation by some legislative members who tipped us off with some comments they dropped a couple of years ago and a year ago. I think COVID and the massive financial impact that it has caused throughout the entire region.
We don't have a transportation budget.
Yeah, sets the table for,
Yeah.
quite frankly,
Yeah.
unfortunately for opt-outs in a way. It sets the table for that discussion to be had. Now, we can go back in time and go back to horribly poor, inefficient, underserved bus service, like what drove the
why
opt-out
we have
legislation in the
opt-out.
first place, right?
Yeah.
The reason that we have opt-outs and Maple Grove and Southwest and MBTA exist is
So that-
because the Met Transit never provided
The
any
service that
kind
we
of good
needed.
quality service that the
Yeah.
suburbs were looking for. And the innovation wasn't there. That's the other thing we would lose. So I think we have a great case for quality service, feedback, customer ratings, efficiencies, and innovation. We're partnering with private sector businesses. Amazon is our first model, and it's going very well and growing. And there's others. We're actually testing the I'll call it the Uber model. Thanks for teeing this up for me, by the way.
No problem.
The Uber model, we have MVTA Connect, which just expanded
Yep.
into Apple Valley and
Yep.
Rosemont. On-demand, $3 bus service from point A to point B, anywhere within the MVTA Connect service. That, to me, is one of the most innovative things.
Prove
Yeah.
on is that it needs to be on a mobile device.
Yes, it is
Because right-
app-driven, but if a person doesn't have a smartphone and doesn't have the app, they can't access the service. So that's what we're
Remember
working on.
Automatic for seniors.
Remember
Yes.
one of our residents who doesn't have a smartphone and doesn't have a iPad?
Yes.
Could not access the service.
They could not access it. So we need one of the things that we're talking about is accessibility issues and how we can make that. There's a way to obviously take that mobile app and turn it into just a web-enabled website. So any kind of access to the web. But it may have to some people will need to make a phone call because that's the only way they can connect. And there's certainly some need there. But this is something that, MBTA is innovating. Met Transit didn't come up with this. This is the opt-out, thinking outside the box, and how do we meet tomorrow's transit needs? Because fixed bus routes are better than a train because they're more flexible, but they can't get to every single address in the city. So the Uber on-demand model really is the long-term solution for that last mile type of thing. So
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Gustafson,
Yeah.
for teeing that
Okay.
up for me.
Dan, you have anything?
One more question before I go? Just kidding, Tim. CVB meets next week, we all heard tonight, so nothing to report on that. And DBB is tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
And I'll report back on that at our next work session.
Okay. Kara?
I am good.
Okay. Vince?
I also have nothing.
Okay. And let's see. Melanie and I, we have, it's tomorrow or Thursday that
Can't do that.
we have our
Thanks.
MLC meeting.
Thursday, we also have a meeting with Savage on
Yeah.
Thursday morning.
And then Thursday, we have our meeting with Savage.
Is that in person or?
That is a Zoom meeting.
Is it-
You should have gotten an invitation this morning, council member.
I'll probably tune in with an earphone like I did last time.
Yeah. So, and that's what I have.
AirPod.
Okay. So there's nothing else to come before us. Melanie, do you have anything else?
I do not, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Give us something.
We
And check out
stand-
Tuesday Night Football and Amazon Prime Day.
Yeah, we stand adjourned by acclamation.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.